DNA test reveals my wife cheated on our wedding day with my best friend, leading to ultimate revenge. I'm out of here, I declared. Fine, and don't bother coming back, my wife shot back. Normally I'd toss out a go to hell as I stormed out, but today I aimed for more civilized parting words. We've slung similar barbs over our 14 years hitched, but this time I won't be circling back. In a few days she'll grasp what I meant this round. Over the past half year or so, Jenna, my wife, turned into a verbal wrecking ball. I couldn't figure it. Her jabs, to put it mildly, stung. I started dodging her to keep things from boiling over. Each day, I'd stall longer in the car. Sometimes, I'd slip back home after Jenna and Carrie, our 13-year-old, finished supper. I had to take care of me. Sometimes, there'd be leftovers. Lately, though, it seems they vanished before I return. I go by Kurt Kaminsky. Technically, it's David Kurt Kaminsky, but my old man's also a David, so they dubbed me Kurt from the start to sidestep confusion. Nope, not a junior, Dad's David John Kaminsky. Why he skipped the junior bit, I can't fathom. I'd happily answer to junior or even DJ, but nope, just Kurt. Or Nat. Yep, I'm Polish. Well, sort of an American with Polish roots. Heard all the jokes, well, most of them. They keep turning out new ones each year. As the lone Pole I know, apart from Dad, in this 10,000-strong town, I've become the punchline. Technically, I'm half Polish. The other half, from Mom's side, is German, French, Irish, and English. But since I'm a Kaminsky, I'm a Pole. My soon-to-be ex-wife ain't who I thought. I only caught wind of this 4 weeks back. As I said, I was keeping clear of her due to the mess. After a few dinners missed, one Monday evening, I hit a diner. In a booth, ready to order, I overheard two guys chatting in the next booth. Caught a phrase with Pole and tuned in. So, how long you been with the Pole's missus since they tied the knot? Heck, I even betted her on their wedding day, and he's clueless. The first voice, unknown. But the second, I knew. My best bud, George Carey. I froze. They kept yakking, but I heard zilch until George spilled, "Yeah, we rendezvous at least twice a month." Kurt's so clueless he doesn't even know what's going on. Dumb luck, just then the waitress came to take my order. Quietly, I murmured, "Sorry, got a jet." I bolted, making sure they didn't catch sight of me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Jenna, my wife, with my closest buddy, the guy who stood by me at the altar. He's also my go-to mechanic, and that's not changing anytime soon. Well, not officially my mechanic, more like an exclusive contractor I rely on solely to fix and inspect all my cars. In case you're wondering, I run a used car dealership. Yeah, I'm a used car salesman. Heard all the jokes and jabs, but business is booming. People trust they're getting top-notch cars at fair prices, and if any issues crop up, I handle them. George has always been a top-notch mechanic, and I keep him busy and compensated well. I wanted to bring him on as staff, but he cracked a joke about not respecting himself if he worked for a Pole. Said it in jest, but I sensed he meant it. Still, I took him on as an independent contractor, though he wasn't all that independent. Truth is, I was his sole source of income, and that fact will be his undoing. Leaving the diner, I cruised the streets, doubting what I'd heard. Was it true, or just his boasting? I might have hired a PI, but if what he said was legit, their meetups were sparse. Might end up a waste of cash, but I decided to snoop through her phone and email. Back home, Jenna was her usual self. Fine by me, I needed the truth before talking to her. When she dozed off, I checked her email, clean. Her phone was locked, but it didn't take me long to crack it. Our daughter's birth date. Found a few sketchy messages, but nothing from George. His name in her contacts wasn't odd, considering he was my pal. Maybe he was just talking trash, I thought. Yet her recent behavior hinted something's amiss. Perhaps not with George, but someone else. I hit the hay, restless. It was past 2:43 a.m. when I finally drifted off. The next day at the dealership, George cracked his usual Polish jokes. I usually let them slide, but today I snapped. "George, what do you even know about Poland? Bet you couldn't find it on a map if your life depended on it. You joke about Poles being dim, but I'm sure they could locate the US, maybe even our state. Get to work." George stared, lost for words. He knew I was on to something. He wasn't the academic type, more street smart, good with engines, not textbooks. I guess that's why we hung out in high school. I'd help him with his studies, ensuring he graduated. Now I'm reconsidering our friendship. He got me thinking about picking a spouse. I retreated to my office, shut the door, and mulled over how to gather evidence. Confronting them both head-on wouldn't fly, they'd just brush it off. I needed solid proof. I rang up a PI in Santa Fe and laid out my worries. He reckoned monitoring them would cost a pretty penny given their sporadic meetups. You could slap a tracker on her phone. At least you'll know its whereabouts when you check. Or set up cameras at home, but unless they're top-notch, and by that I mean pricey, they'll likely get spotted. Even with fancy gear, if she's alert, she'll probably catch on. If I were you, I'd tag her phone and hope to catch them red-handed. He suggested a tracking program and waived off payment. Consider it a freebie, he said. Everything I told you is online anyway. Still, you came through with valuable advice. Expect a check, I insisted. If you ever swing by Silver City, drop by Kaminsky's lot, he offered. I don't usually venture out that way, but if I do, I'll look you up, I replied, and I sensed he meant it. A big part of my sales success came from making folks feel important. Early on, I learned folks crave validation. I opted for the tracking software, saving cash and hassle on cameras Jenna might spot. That night, when everyone was out cold, I sneaked up and installed the tracking app on her phone, syncing it with mine. It'll run in the background, unbeknownst to her. Finally, I slept soundly. The next day at work, I kept tabs on the app. Jenna worked part-time at the uni bookstore, 15 to 20 hours a week. She called her earnings mad money and splurged at the salon. She hit the grocery store and later was back home. George was home most of the day, but whenever Jenna was in, he was out working, so at least for that day, I figured nothing had gone down. That evening, I tried being more civil to my wife and daughter, suggesting dinner out. My wife seemed somewhat responsive. Our daughter, typical teen, hesitated, but I insisted. Dinner went smoothly. I casually brought up George and Jenna shifted uncomfortably, swiftly changing the subject, fueling my suspicions. I want to find out if George's words hold water. I've got to get to the bottom of this somehow. That night, I refrained from checking her phone. My attempts to peek at her calls or texts came up empty. Either she swiftly deleted them or didn't make any at all. Climbing into bed, I thanked Jenna. Thanks for joining us for dinner. Thank you, Kurt. It was a nice surprise, she replied, meeting my gaze. You might be in luck tonight. It's been a while, and like I mentioned, we haven't been getting along lately. After her usual nightly routine in the bathroom, Jenna nestled beside me. I felt conflicted about the possibility of closeness with her. If she had been unfaithful, did I even want it? I resolved to let her take the lead. Until I had solid evidence, I wouldn't initiate. We did end up being physically engaged, but it was rather ordinary, no need for specifics. Well, at least I enjoyed it. Throughout the week, I kept tabs on her phone's location, finding nothing out of the ordinary. On Saturday night, while she slept, I checked her phone for any messages or calls, yet again finding nothing. I was close to convincing myself that George was just blowing smoke, trying to impress someone with his tales of conquests. This wasn't the first time I'd known him to do so since our school days. I tossed and turned in bed once more, my subconscious refusing to let me sleep. At 2 a.m., I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to drift off. I decided to go downstairs for a drink, hoping it might help me relax. Sitting with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other, I decided to check it once more. Entering the password, our daughter's birth date, I opened her phone to the home page. Suddenly, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Our daughter's birth date was the key. Jenna's. Pregnancy had been challenging. We had feared losing her several times due to complications. There was an issue with her Rh factor not matching Jenna's, causing her body to reject the baby. Jenna spent the last 3 weeks of the pregnancy on bed rest to ensure the baby's safe delivery, and indeed, Carrie was born exactly 9 months after our wedding. We were overjoyed at her health, but she proved to be a demanding child. She cried incessantly, had trouble sleeping, and struggled with nursing. It was tough going. In Carrie's second year, Jenna firmly declared we weren't having another child. It saddened me, but truthfully, the baby had drained much of the joy from our lives. I mentioned that she was born 9 months after our wedding. They call such children wedding night babies because they're conceived on that night or during the honeymoon. A light bulb went off in my head. If George's claims were true, then there was a strong chance Jenna was already pregnant before our wedding night. Jenna was on the pill. No, we didn't wait until marriage to be physically engaged. It was a significant part of our relationship. The doctor speculated that the stress of the wedding might have interfered with her hormones, rendering the pills ineffective. Well, if the pills failed that night, they likely failed that day too. Now I know what to do. There's a 50 to 50% chance I'm not the father. You know the saying, the early bird gets the worm. Well, George might have been an early bird, but in his case it seems the early worm gets the birdie. I got off the couch and headed to the bathroom where I found some cotton swabs. Carrie was fast asleep in her room. She finally settled into a good sleep routine at 4 years old. Before that, it was a struggle. She lay there snoring with her mouth open. It was simple to gently swab the inside of her cheek with a Q-tip. She didn't even stir. After sealing it in a plastic bag, I repeated the process for myself. Even if Carrie turned out to be my biological daughter, it still left questions about Jenna's faithfulness. If she wasn't, but I pushed those thoughts aside for later consideration. Sunday was for chores, and we each had our tasks. I took my time, avoiding Jenna and Carrie, to keep my emotions in check. I was anxious to confirm my suspicions, but plagued by doubt all day. "Something on your mind, Kurt?" Jenna inquired. I needed a quick answer, so I replied, "I'm planning to buy a bunch of cars at the next auction to stock up the lot. Money might be tight until I make some sales." "Just don't overextend," she advised, always referring to the business as ours, though it was really mine. I'd say, set it up as a separate entity to protect my personal finances. Living in a religious community, I didn't want business decisions to affect my personal life negatively. "I'm thinking of paying off the credit cards and keeping only one open to improve our credit," I told her. It was a tactic to mask my strategy in case she found out about it later. "Do what you think is best," she responded indifferently. The idea came to me in a flash. It's amazing what your mind can do when you let it. This would minimize fallout if my suspicions proved true. So, bright and early Monday, I took the samples to Western New Mexico University and spoke with someone in the science department. They directed me to the department head, who welcomed the opportunity. I handed over some business cards and offered a 10% discount to anyone working on the samples. He seemed appreciative. "I've been eyeing a new car to replace my Camry. I might swing by and check out your selection. If nothing catches my eye, I'll work with you to find something," I mentioned. "Thank you, I'll keep that in mind," he replied. As I left the university, I knew I wore a smile, but it was tinged with worry. The test results could spell the end of my marriage. When I mentioned buying new cars to Jenna, it was merely a cover-up for my troubled thoughts, yet the idea started to grow on me. I summoned Paul, my accountant, loan officer, and occasional salesperson, into my office and shared my plans. "We're going to make this work," I assured him. "There's something else, Paul," I continued. "I want to clear the mortgage on my house. Can we work out a lump sum payment?" "Let me crunch the numbers and get back to you after lunch," he replied, exiting my office. As he left, I pondered contacting my lawyer for a family law referral. But then I hesitated, thinking, hold your horses. Let's see the results first. I've yet to find concrete evidence of infidelity. After lunch, Paul presented the spreadsheet and we discussed the next moves for both plans. The following 2 days dragged on, each moment filled with anticipation for the DNA test results. Late Wednesday evening, the department head phoned, confirming the outcome and arranging a visit to discuss the car. When he arrived, I ushered him into my office. His expression said it all before he even spoke. "The samples aren't related," he confirmed. I nodded, though the news hit hard, even though I'd half expected it. He gave me a moment before handing over the envelope with the results. When I glanced back up, my demeanor shifted. "So, about that car you were eyeing," I inquired. "Well, it might sound cliché, but I've hit the big 50 and I'm eyeing a sports car." "Thinking of a Mazda Miata," he shared. Though I didn't have one in stock, I promised to scour the auction the next day for a well-kept one. "I'll ring you this afternoon with any updates," I assured him as he left. "I've told Anna I might leave early, but I'll be reachable if needed," I thought to myself, knowing she wouldn't call. She rarely required my assistance. She handled most tasks herself. As I drove around the city, everything seemed different. I made a call to my lawyer, who, though saddened by the news, directed me to a colleague he trusted. After the call, I booked an evening appointment. The next day, over a snack at a restaurant, I reflected, have I truly squandered the past 15 years? I couldn't even claim to have a child from this marriage. While I still regarded her as my child to some extent, biologically, she wasn't mine. What to do next? I couldn't pretend ignorance anymore. I'd been aware before, but now there was no turning back. One thing I was certain of, George would face consequences. It didn't matter that he'd been my closest friend for years. With friends like him, enemies seemed preferable. Jenna, too, would face repercussions. I wondered if she was aware that Carrie wasn't mine. Even if she wasn't, she kept this truth hidden from me, the secret of her infidelity on our wedding day with my best man, my supposed friend. Now I had no reason to doubt what I'd overheard. She indulged with him at least twice monthly. Anger began to well up inside me, and before it spiraled out of control, I knew I needed solitude, away from everyone. I should have called Jenna, informing her I wouldn't be home that evening. Going home was out of the question. I feared I might do something that would land me in jail. She picked up the call. "Hello, Kurt. Hey, I'll be spending the night in Albuquerque to prep for the auction tomorrow at 8. Oh, I responded flatly. Well, okay then. Have a safe trip. I rarely ventured to Albuquerque for auctions, so this deviation was notable. I wondered if she'd exploit my absence for the night. She'd have to come up with an excuse regarding Carrie for my parents, which wouldn't be easy to explain. Nevertheless, I'd intermittently check her phone tracker throughout the evening to see if she ventured elsewhere. I navigated the roads to Albuquerque, aiming to purchase at least 20 cars, including a Mazda Miata. I'd arranged for their pickup and delivery to my lot post-auction. Now, the dilemma was who to entrust for their mechanical inspection. I knew George wouldn't get any further business from me once his current routine inspections and repairs were done. Upon hearing I'd acquired 24 cars, he'd likely envision dollar signs and inflate his charges, but that wasn't going to happen. I'd keep it under wraps until the last minute. I needed to consult with a local auction dealer to identify someone skilled and dependable to inspect them before shipping to our small town. Arriving in Albuquerque around 9 a.m., I checked into a Best Western hotel. Despite being the owner, I couldn't justify splurging on an expensive hotel using company funds. The room was comfortable, as was the bed, just what I needed. I'm a simple person with simple needs. Upon entering the room, I immediately checked Jenna's phone tracker, discovering she was still at home, or at least her phone was. Sleep proved elusive that night. I couldn't shake off thoughts about her actions and motivations. How could she justify her affair, especially on our wedding day, and continue it for who knows how long? I started to reassess our marriage. It was never perfect, but I believed in our exclusive love. Now, I realized it was a mistake from the very beginning. In the initial years following the wedding, things weren't smooth sailing. Naturally, we didn't anticipate a baby right away. Our original plan was to wait 3 to 4 years before starting a family. We had agreed on having 3 children before tying the knot. However, Carrie's arrival disrupted these plans. Learning that my best friend was the cause of this disruption made all the struggles seem futile. 14 years of effort seemed wasted, despite the good times we'd had being overshadowed by this revelation. If Jenna hadn't been involved with George, perhaps she would have conceived with me. Maybe her pregnancy wouldn't have been as difficult, and we wouldn't have had such a challenging child, leading her to not desire more children. George shattered my life when he seduced my future wife on our wedding day. Now he entertains her at least twice a month, all the while likely mocking me, the oblivious Pole. He must face consequences, I thought, as I lay down, attempting to calm myself and drift off to sleep. Anger simmered within me once more. I needed to regain composure or risk a sleepless night. I turned on the TV to watch a mindless comedy show. Laughter helped soothe my nerves, and I was ready to doze off, looking ahead to a busy day. The auction went smoothly. I snagged some excellent cars at favorable prices and networked with dealers in the Albuquerque area. Spotting no Miatas at the auction, I inquired with other dealers. 2 of them had one each, one red and the other black. I negotiated potential deals pending confirmation of my client's preferred color. Naturally, both dealers agreed, assuring me they'd handle the transaction. Once I provided details of the cars on my lot, I should have frequented this auction more often. Interacting with fellow businessmen in the same industry inspired me to expand my operations and provided a welcome distraction from my personal troubles. Later in the afternoon, during my meeting with the lawyer, the news wasn't encouraging. I faced losing half of my assets, along with alimony and child support payments for a child who wasn't even mine. In that moment, I decided against pursuing a divorce. Instead, I resolved to leave her with George's child, paying off the mortgage on the house. She could remain there, but with only my name on the mortgage, she wouldn't be able to sell it. By continuing to cover taxes and utilities while living elsewhere, she wouldn't have the option to resign and claim the house. However, I needed to make a decision regarding my business. Although it was registered as a corporation, I had a gut feeling that without proper protection, I could risk losing it. Consulting my business lawyer became a priority. Arriving home utterly exhausted from a demanding day, I informed Jenna of my fatigue. "I'm beat, planning to shower and hit the sack," I muttered, making my way to the bedroom. "Want dinner?" she inquired. "No, had a late lunch," I replied. At least she cared enough to ask. The shower was blissful, almost like my troubles were washing away. While problems persisted, I found solace in devising solutions. Minutes after my head hit the pillow, sleep enveloped me. The past week had been stressful, but with a plan in motion, I finally found mental reprieve. Rising early, feeling rejuvenated, I headed to the office before Jenna and Carrie stirred. There, amid spreadsheets and financial reports, I orchestrated my next moves. I briefed Paul on the 23 car purchases and instructed Anna to cease assigning work to George emphasizing the need for secrecy. She eyed me quizzically. "You're the boss," she remarked. "Thank you, Anna. You're invaluable." At 9 sharp, I phoned my business lawyer seeking advice. "Your business is registered, but she might still force a sale to claim half its value. Consider selling preemptively," he suggested. "I can't. It's my life," I retorted. "Let me mull it over and get back to you by week's end." This news hit hard. I'd poured sweat and tears into building my business, akin to raising a child. Unlike Carrie, I thought bitterly. Rage threatened to consume me again, but as a seasoned businessman, I knew to compartmentalize. I refocused on my business agenda. First up, contacting Doug, who confirmed George's claims. "Doug, Kurt Kaminsky here. I've got intel on 2 Miatas you might fancy, red and black. Still interested?" "If the price is right," he replied. "Which color do you prefer?" "Let me show you both." "We'll crunch numbers afterward. Even if we can't agree, I can sell it easily," I assured. "And your pick?" he pressed. "Red makes a bold statement but fades faster. Black's elegant but heats up quickly here. Planning to garage it?" "Yes," he affirmed. "Red it is then. When can we meet?" "Monday or Tuesday." "Perfect. Call upon arrival. Deal." After hanging up, I dialed the dealer with the red Miata to negotiate a swap. He showed interest in the BMW sitting on my lot for 3 months, recognizing its better prospects in a larger city. Meanwhile, George showed up with several cars still awaiting repairs. As an independent contractor, his flexible schedule suited my needs, despite my simmering anger toward him. Overhearing salesmen discussing the impending arrival of 23 cars, George inquired about the schedule. "Hey Kurt, when are these cars from the auction coming in? I want to plan my repairs," he queried. "The auction house will handle the delivery, likely late next week or early the following," I informed him tersely, struggling to keep calm in the presence of this betrayer. I managed to chuckle as he departed. That weekend, I distanced myself from Jenna, occupying myself with yard work and errands. Checking her phone tracker no longer concerned me. I harbored only contempt for her. Raising another man's child felt unforgivable. Monday found me back at the car show. I arranged to trade the BMW for the Miata, setting off to Albuquerque to finalize the deal. "We'll grab lunch upon your arrival," the dealer suggested. Informing Anna of my day-long absence, I instructed her to hold the fort. "Got it, boss," she affirmed, her reliability shining through. A raise was in order. The journey and lunch were pleasant, forging a new camaraderie with the dealer. Driving back in the Miata, wind tousling my hair, I relished the freedom. Deciding to splurge further, I resolved to procure a black car, realizing I didn't need more than a 2-seater. Soon, I pulled into our driveway in a fiery red sports car. Jenna glanced out the window and exchanged words with Carrie, prompting them both to step outside to observe. "Why do you need this car, honey?" "We need something with a back seat for Carrie," she remarked patronizingly. "Just picked it up from Albuquerque for a client. Thought you might want to take a ride," I responded. "No, honey, I'm not a fan of small cars," Jenna retorted with a hint of disdain. "Carrie," I called, motioning for my daughter to join us. "No, Dad, I'm already teased enough because of my last name. I don't want to be seen with a Polish used car salesman." Her words stung, typical of a teenager's bluntness. I was taken aback. Where did this disrespect come from? Glancing at Jenna, I realized she was treating Carrie's remark as inconsequential. Now both the women in my house were showing disrespect. Teenagers might not always be close with their parents, but the hurtful manner in which she spoke made me question the authenticity of my family life. "I'm going for another drive. I'll be back soon," I announced, shifting the car into reverse and driving off. Fueled by frustration, I navigated the roads of Silver City until I returned home around 9:30, heading straight upstairs. I took a quick shower and crawled into bed. When I didn't emerge from the shower, Jenna entered the room, casting a bright light into my eyes. Squinting, I closed my eyes. "Are you sulking because we didn't choose a sports car? Aren't you going to spend time with your family?" "You're not just Polish, you're childish," she chided. Her sudden attitude shift puzzled me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it stemmed from George. Spending time with him had seemingly influenced her disregard for my heritage, now passed on to our daughter. Yet she wasn't even my daughter. Despite supporting her, I needed to accept that fact. "Looks like you and your daughter would rather do without a pole around, so you might as well just leave," I retorted heatedly. Her demeanor only fueled my anger. She would regret treating me this way. From then on, the atmosphere in the Kaminsky household grew cold and silent. The following day, I contacted Doug, who came over to inspect the Miata. He was thrilled with it. After discussing the numbers, he was pleasantly surprised by the great deal he received, less than Kelly Blue Book. As he was finishing up the paperwork, he mentioned, "My best friend handles purchasing for the university, and we rotate about cars every 2 years. It might not be much, but could you speak with him?" "Always happy to do business, and I'll ensure he gets a good deal," I replied. "I'll have Jim reach out to you by the end of the week." "Thank you," I said. That's how I expanded my business, by treating people well and showing appreciation for their referrals. On Wednesday, my lawyer called. "Hey Kurt, I think I have a solution to your potential issue. Can you swing by this afternoon to discuss it?" "Absolutely. I'm eager to get started." The tension at home had become unbearable. At the meeting later that day, I heard the plan and was pleased with it. It would take about 2 weeks to execute, but if successful, it would be worth it. Over those 2 weeks, I gradually moved personal items and tools from my house to an apartment nearby. Meanwhile, George awaited the arrival of the 24 cars to do some work, but I kept delaying him. During the past weekend, I did some yard work and cleared out my closet and drawers when Jenna and Carrie weren't around. Jenna did laundry during the week, so she didn't notice the emptiness of my closet. This brings me back to that Monday night when I told Jenna, "I'm leaving." She once again began to show rudeness and disrespect, targeting me for being Polish and a used car salesman. In the past, I would go to a motel for a night or two, depending on my level of anger. The following Tuesday morning, I arrived at the parking lot early and gathered my employees in the conference room. It was a regular weekly meeting, so nothing seemed unusual. I began, "Good morning. As you all know, the cars I purchased a couple of weeks ago arrived yesterday afternoon. They've all been inspected and prepped, ready for sale. We won't be using George for any more work here. If he asks, just say we're going in a different direction. You've all been fantastic. You're like family to me, so it's tough to discuss what's next." Pausing to wipe a tear, I continued, "I've sold the business." Surprised, they looked at me, "But nothing changes regarding your roles except Anna, who will take on some of my duties and receive a corresponding raise." Despite their astonishment, they began congratulating Anna, recognizing her hard work and worthiness. "Anna, please come talk to me after the meeting. There are some things we need to discuss," I said. "I'll still be involved in the company, but only in an advisory capacity and may occasionally sell. I don't want to interfere with your sales," I assured her. They were all relieved that I'd still be around, even if only occasionally. After the meeting, as we exited, George stood there. "Hey, why wasn't I included in the meeting?" he asked, surprised. "Because it was for staff only and you're not an employee," I explained. He seemed taken aback. "I see the cars have arrived. I'll get to work on them," he said. "No need. They've already been prepared for sale," I replied firmly, leaving him stunned. "But I always check the cars," he protested. "George, I've sold the business, and the new owner wants to go in a different direction," I informed him, holding back my anger. "I'll save that for another day." I kept it brief, realizing sometimes less is more. "I can't believe you sold the business," he exclaimed, making it about himself. "Or what now?" "You can pick up your check for the past 2 weeks' work. It wasn't much. Anna rarely utilized your services," I stated bluntly. He'd been expecting to work on the cars, but he was out of luck. I felt no sympathy. I just wished I could tell him what I really thought of him. When I spoke with Anna, I asked her to keep our conversation confidential. "Of course, Kurt, I'll never divulge anything you don't want," she assured me. "Here's the plan. I've set up companies registered in Nevada. One buys the parking lot, the other buys the company. I own all the shares in both. Eventually, I'll divorce Jenna and ensure she doesn't get the business." "Why?" she asked. "I've moved out. Jenna doesn't know yet, but I'm not going back. She had an affair with George. In fact, Carrie isn't my daughter. I suspect she's George's. I'm not sure if Jenna knows, let alone George. They'll find out soon. I won't divorce, but I'll keep paying utilities and taxes for our house, so she can't claim abandonment and take everything. If she files for divorce, I don't want her to take over the business. That's why I agreed to the company being bought twice. Let them figure it out. The proceeds will be spent by the time she gets the divorce done. Plus, I barely make anything from consulting and a few commissions. Anna, you can handle daily operations. I'll be available for questions, but I trust you and your judgment," I explained. Anna smiled at the news of the new owner, but when she heard about Jenna and George, her expression turned deadly serious. This woman was someone I deeply admired and respected. "I have one more task for you before I go. I need you to order a new sign and letterhead. We're changing the business name to Helpless Car. This will reinforce the idea to George and Jenna that the business is under new ownership," I explained. I spelled out the name to ensure she got it right. She looked puzzled. "I'll explain the name choice someday. For now, just know it tells the whole story," I told her. Though she seemed puzzled, she trusted me enough to follow through with that. I bid farewell to everyone and headed out. I got into my Audi and drove towards Albuquerque. About 2 hours later, I received a call from Jenna. I hadn't expected her to call so soon. This was a familiar pattern. I'd leave for a day or two, she'd call, we'd talk, and I'd return. Things would change briefly, then revert to how they were before. We'd have another argument, and the cycle would repeat. I decided to answer the call, curious to hear what she would say this time. "Hello," I spoke through the car's speakerphone. "Kurt, what's going on?" she asked, sounding hesitant. "Nothing much, just heading to Albuquerque," I replied flatly. "Why are you going there?" she inquired. "To pick up the car," I stated without emotion. "So what I heard must not be true. George must have called you, figuratively speaking. Perhaps he asked your mistress what's going on with her husband," she speculated. "I don't know," I responded. "What did you hear?" she pressed. "George called and said you sold the business," she revealed. "Why would he call you?" I questioned, perplexing her. She corrected herself. "Heck, your best friend. He was curious if I knew." Best friend, what a joke. I was a joke to him. The silly Pole, clueless about what's happening with his own wife behind his back. Apparently, my family felt embarrassed that I was a used car salesman. So yes, I sold the business. Now you won't have to bear that stigma anymore. "Shouldn't we have discussed this first?" she worried, likely concerned about our livelihood. "This is my company. I owned it before we got married, and I can sell it whenever I want. I just hope the new owner treats my former employees well." "Did you get a good price for it?" She fretted about her standard of living. I didn't care. I just knew I needed a change. "I'll start job hunting after I take some time off to relax." "What about the mortgage?" she panicked. "I used the money to pay off the house. You only need to worry about utilities and taxes now." "What about food, gas, insurance?" she almost hysterically asked. "Guess I overlooked those." "Do you think you could work more hours?" I suggested. "When are you coming home?" This was the moment of truth. She pressed. "I won't return," I said casually. "Remember what you said when I left that evening? Don't worry, I'll figure out how to cover the bills so the power won't be shut off." "You can't do this, Kurt. You need to come back," she pleaded, desperation evident in her voice. "No, I really don't want to," I responded impassively. "Kurt, please don't do this," she cried. "I've already made my decision." "What about your daughter?" She tried to appeal to my emotions. "You mean Carrie? The girl who's ashamed of her last name and the fact that her old man is or was a used car salesman? Kurt, she's just a year-old girl." "You can't take this to heart," I retorted. "Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't be back. Again, so none of you will be embarrassed by me." With those words, I hung up and powered off the phone, letting her contemplate. I knew she'd try calling me back and grow frustrated when I didn't answer. After calming down from the call, I tried to enjoy the leisurely drive to Albuquerque. I assumed her next move would be to contact her lover for more information and to relay what I'd said. Upon reaching my destination, I switched my phone back on and noticed 5 missed messages. I listened to them, 3 from Jenna, 1 from George, and 1 from Anna. I immediately dialed Anna. "Hi, Anna. Sorry my phone was off. I've been getting unwanted calls," I explained. "Yes, I know. Your wife and George called me to find out where you were. I told them you don't own this place anymore, so you won't be coming back." "Hope everything is okay," Anna informed me. "Great," I replied. "If they hassle you too much, tell them you'll call the police for phone harassment." "I like that," she said. "Kurt, you might feel like you don't have family or friends anymore, but trust me, you do. We're your family and always will be." "Thank you, Anna. You know just what to say. I hope your husband realizes how lucky he is," I remarked. "Trust me, he does. He tells me all the time." "Never take that for granted," she assured me. "I won't," I promised. After ending the call, I debated whether to call my unfaithful wife or that idiot. Nah, let them stew. Exiting the Audi, I entered the parking lot office where the owner awaited. "I have that Audi I mentioned. Interested in discussing a swap," he proposed. "Let's see." He admired the car's condition, inside, out, and under the hood. "I could sell it in a week. Are you sure about the exchange? Feels like I'm getting the better end." "You can return the favor sometime," he suggested. "I'm not here to profit, just want a sports car," I replied. 30 minutes later, back on the road, top down, relishing the ride. Now, where to? North sounded good, so off to Santa Fe. Over the next 2 weeks, I journeyed through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah, and Colorado. I stayed close in case Anna needed me. I checked in with her a few times, and once things seemed settled, I headed west. Of course, they kept calling at first, annoyance, then apologies, finally, hints of resentment. I listened but shrugged it off. When they reported my canceled credit card, I chuckled. George even called, branding me a villain for leaving Jenna and Carrie. I chuckled some more. My lawyer texted me. Jenna threatened legal action if I didn't return. I returned his call. Hello, Kurt speaking. So, my wife made threats to you? Yes, but if you're still paying on the house, don't worry. She'll struggle to prove it. I assured him, I can offer something better. I have a recording where I declare my departure, and she insists I don't come back. It's gold. Send it my way, he requested. If she causes any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let them sort it out. Thanks. I'll check in next week to see how it's going. I roamed the Southwest. The Miata wasn't the coziest, but it was a blast. Caught glances, even a few flashes from bored middle-aged women, but I wasn't seeking that. After all, I was still hitched, no matter what. Drove to Reno, then Lake Tahoe, the coast, Napa Valley, and zigzagged along Highway 1, Yosemite, San Diego, Death Valley, to Vegas, then Phoenix. No rush. Chatted with folks in parking lots. Some envied a guy in his 30 seconds who could just hit the road. After approximately 3 months and covering 8,000 miles, I opted to head back to Silver City. Upon arrival at Helpless Auto, I was warmly welcomed by my entire team, including a few new faces. They all expressed joy at my return. Stepping into Anna's office, formerly mine, she looked up, spotting me. Her smile widened even more. Rising from her chair, she walked around her desk and gave me a tight hug. After chatting for a bit, I inquired, "Do you think I can treat everyone to food and drinks at Wrangler's? Can you close the store by 5? It was already 3. Absolutely, I'll make sure of it. The whole team will be there. After bidding them farewell and announcing our meeting in 2 hours, I left them in high spirits. Next, I paid a visit to my lawyer. During my travels, he informed me that Jenna had attempted to claim abandonment to seize my assets, but he managed to thwart her efforts. We discussed our next steps. At 5, I joined the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We enjoyed a fantastic dinner, and it was delightful catching up with everyone. As the evening wound down, they began to depart, leaving only Anna and me. She gazed at me and said, "You know, Kurt, you might feel powerless and lost, but you're mistaken. You simply placed trust in those you loved." I met her gaze. "So you figured it out?" "Yes, it took some time, but your mention of the new name telling the whole story lingered in my mind until I grasped it. You may be Polish, but those jokes never truly define you. They insult your heritage and who you are." "Thank you, Anna. You're the primary reason I returned. I had to witness how you handled my responsibilities. I'm pleased to say you haven't filled my shoes, you forged your own path." "I had an exceptional mentor," she expressed gratitude. We embraced, and then she departed to her husband, who appeared genuinely content. I headed back to the apartment I hadn't visited in 3 months. The air was stale, necessitating some ventilation. Opening the windows, I allowed the refreshing evening breeze to permeate the rooms. I grabbed a beer and settled on the terrace overlooking the pool. Several people were swimming, and a family was enjoying themselves nearby. My mind drifted to Jenna and me. We once harbored lofty aspirations and dreams when we tied the knot. Now they seemed to have vanished. Glancing at the wall clock, I noted it was around 8:30. A realization struck me. It was time for a confrontation. I rose, hopped into my Miata, and drove to my house, technically still mine since I purchased it before marrying Jenna, and my name was the only one on the deed. Disappointment washed over me as I pulled into the driveway. The yard was unkempt. It appeared the landscaping had been neglected. The porch light was on, indicating Jenna was likely home. I approached the door and knocked. After a moment, Carrie answered. Her eyes widened as she greeted me. "Dad? Hi, Carrie. Is your mom home?" She stuttered before yelling, "Mother." From the kitchen, I heard Jenna's tense, high-pitched voice. "What's the matter?" Carrie continued to stare at me and loudly exclaimed, "Dad!" Jenna appeared from around the corner, spotting me, and shrieked, "Where are you going?" I opted to respond calmly to her outcry. "Traveling," I stated evenly. Just then, George emerged from the bedroom in his underwear. "Oh," I remarked, "the whole family is here, Mom, Dad, and child." "What the hell are you talking about?" Jenna retorted sharply. "I guess George has stepped in to fill my role." "After all, it's rightfully his," I remarked. Jenna appeared puzzled, while Carrie's tone turned visibly enraged. "Actually, young lady, you seem to be misinformed," I interjected, knowing she disliked being corrected. "George never worked for me by his own choice, so I couldn't have fired him. Regarding bills, all utilities and car insurance are covered." Jenna interrupted. "What about groceries and gas for the car? You had a job, did you lose it? It used to cover expenses while I was away. Do you think you can just waltz back in and take over?" Jenna challenged. "No, I'll wait until you and your partner find somewhere else to live." It was clear they were staying together in my house, and Carrie seemed fine with it. Jenna retorted, "I'm not leaving my home." "Correction, this is my home. It was mine before we married, and only my name is on the deed, I asserted. You left, so now it's mine, Jenna insisted. That's not how the law works. Since I cover the utilities and taxes, I remain the legal owner. Even though I've been away briefly, it's still mine. Don't worry, I'll give you until the end of next month to find a new place. Just make sure you take your daughter with you. What do you mean your daughter? She's our daughter, Jenna protested. You couldn't have said it more accurately, I chuckled. Jenna looked confused. Turning to Carrie, I disclosed, Carrie, I know you dislike being called Polish, so here's some news. Your real father isn't me. It's George. Silence enveloped the room. After a moment, Jenna whispered, What? Yes, Jenna. It seems your carelessness on our wedding day resulted in a child, but not mine. However, it's good news for you, Carrie. You can now take your real father's last name and become Carrie George's daughter. I wonder if perhaps Mom chose the name Carrie out of respect for her lover, I pondered aloud. Jenna and George exchanged looks, the color draining from his face. What about you, George? Don't you want to step up as a father? Well, that's unfortunate. It's time to take responsibility. But look at the bright side, it's just 4 more years until college, I remarked. Jenna and George nearly echoed each other. I don't believe this. With a swift motion, I handed them the DNA report. See for yourselves. They snatched it, glanced at it, and then both collapsed. Carrie, inform the Lovebirds that your mom will be served with divorce papers next week, along with an eviction notice, I instructed. Before walking away. Throughout my absence, I couldn't shake the thought of whether this affair had been ongoing during our marriage. Did she choose me, or was I just a pawn? I felt utterly helpless, ignorant, and vulnerable. George had mocked me behind my back and even cracked Polish jokes to my face. Back at the apartment, I drowned my thoughts in beer. The next morning, I visited the lawyer to initiate the paperwork. Despite knowing I'd have to sell the house and split the proceeds, being a barely working person meant I wouldn't owe alimony or child support, especially with another man in my place. Or at least, that's what I hoped for. The betrayal by Jenna and George was devastating. Rebuilding trust, whether with a man or woman, would be a daunting task. Perhaps I should consider therapy. As the divorce proceedings commenced, I returned to work at the dealership, emphasizing to my colleagues that I was no longer the boss and only needed 1 sale per week to cover my expenses. I even insisted on just 1. When faced with court-ordered child support, I ensured that my bank accounts were emptied, leaving only enough for my basic needs. At month's end, Jenna hired a lawyer, though I questioned how she could afford one. Perhaps he worked pro bono. Regardless, they'd be in for a surprise. Despite scrutinizing my accounts and the sale itself, they failed to uncover anything substantial. I learned from my colleagues that during my absence, George visited the dealership almost daily for the first 2 weeks, trying to secure work from Anna. However, she consistently turned him down. Eventually, he gave up. Now he regretted not obtaining his ASC certification, as his only job prospect was at Valine doing quick oil changes for $13 an hour. I hoped Jenna would work full-time, or they'd struggle financially. I contacted the realtor and notified Jenna that I was listing the house for sale, anticipating a 50-50th split of our assets. Since she had already received an eviction notice, she needed to vacate before the sale closed. One evening, Jenna knocked on my door and I reluctantly let her in. What do you want? Kurt, can we talk? She asked. I'm not sure it's a good idea. We're in a legal battle, I replied. Come on, Kurt, it's just us, no lawyers. Can we have a civil conversation? She pleaded. All right, but let's go to Denny's, I suggested. There'll be witnesses, I thought to myself. I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her. At Denny's, after exchanging pleasantries, I asked, Why, Jenna? She hesitated before answering. I guess the simple answer is that I liked both of you and couldn't choose. So you were seeing both of us at the same time? I questioned. Jenna looked down and admitted yes, but George warned me not to tell you because he knew it would ruin your relationship with him. Then why did you say yes when I proposed? I inquired. Because I loved you and George, she replied. I loved him too, but I knew he wouldn't make a good husband, so we ended things when you proposed, and I focused on us and our wedding plans. So, on our wedding day, you were with him? I probed. Jenna started crying and confessed, yes, everything was a mess then. What was it? I pressed further. I didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose me, she admitted. Well, now you have each other and your child. By the way, you did a great job with the name. I didn't even realize until later during my travels that Carrie wasn't yours, I revealed. Jenna looked at me and said, Kurt, I still love you. It's nice to hear, Jenna, but I'm not sure you understand what love truly means, I replied. I loved you more than anything, and clearly you can't say the same. I loved you, she retorted, but now I feel nothing but contempt, I stated firmly. Jenna realized our relationship was over. There would never be an us again. Before she left, I had to ask one final question. Have you ever stopped? After hesitating, she decided to tell the truth. We never ceased. We had our quiet times, but we typically met twice a month, she admitted. I was hoping for a different response, but I appreciated her honesty. One more thing, about a year ago, your behavior towards me changed. What triggered it? I inquired. Her face flushed red, then she grew slightly angry. George started pushing for a bacchanalia, not involving you. I might have considered it if you were involved, but we couldn't navigate it. His persistence made me resent you for something I knew you wouldn't agree to. It's odd, but I thought I could have both of my men together and resented you for not being open to it, she confessed. Did you go through with it? I asked. No, I contemplated it, but then you left and everything fell apart, she admitted. Well, now you're free to pursue it. Your choices don't affect me anymore, I remarked. Sensing our conversation was concluding, I settled the bill and we headed to our cars. 4 months later, we stood before a judge and finalized our divorce. George was present too. Exiting the courthouse, Jenna suggested, maybe we can grab a drink the traditional way. Certainly, I agreed. Despite the previous animosity, it had dissipated. Then I thought, this marks the end of my association with them. They can now be together. Let them wallow in their own mess, they deserve each other. Ha! Jenna will have to adjust to a lower standard of living. All right, maybe the resentment hasn't completely faded, despite being policey demand respect.
Our baby monitor exposed my wife's cheating in HD, so I ruined her career for it. I, 35 male, and my wife, 33 female, have been married for almost 7 years now. We met at a local fair, I asked her out, and things basically took off from there. It's been a good relationship and a good marriage, and we have our ups and downs like every other couple. But generally speaking, we have a very wholesome relationship, and I've always been very thankful for it. We weren't trying for a child for a pretty long time because we wanted to make the most out of our relative youth while we still had it. But last year, we decided to change things up. My wife, let's call her Naomi, got pregnant, and we had our baby at the beginning of the year. I've always wanted to have a kid, so when my daughter was born, it was genuinely the happiest moment of my life. There's nothing that I can say to describe it beyond that. Adjusting to parenthood is hard though, and it became pretty clear how much it ties up your life. If you don't have dependable friends or family around, it becomes really hard to have a day to yourself unless you're open to paying a nanny to take care of your kid. That was an expense that me and my wife really couldn't take on, so we passed on that. But anyway, it was clear that if we wanted to go out to eat at a restaurant, we would need to arrange with someone to watch the baby. And it really wasn't that easy since we don't have many family members living close by. I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining how things were. It was because of the way things were that I decided that we needed to get a baby monitor. If the baby was sleeping, as babies tend to do for a very long time, then we could potentially go somewhere extremely close by and rush back if the baby started to stir or wake up. I know on paper it sounds irresponsible, but honestly, not having any spontaneity was starting to weigh on us. I discussed it with my wife, and she was apprehensive about us leaving the baby at home for extended periods. But I told her that we would never go hang out anywhere that was more than a 5-minute walk from our place. Ultimately, we left the decision hanging, and I expected that we were going to talk about it again at some point. Naomi works at a place of her own on the corner of our street, selling flowers and floral arrangements. She's always been a creative type, and she has always loved flowers. So I basically lent her the empty store, which my uncle left to me after passing away from cancer, to use rent-free. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, and her having such a well-located store was definitely going to be to both our benefit. She has a couple of girls who work for her, so she doesn't always go to work, but she does on most days. I work remotely, so it works perfectly for us. On one of those days that she did, I decided to buy a Wi-Fi baby monitor on Amazon on a whim. I did. Recognized before I purchased it that we hadn't both concluded and agreed on getting it, but it really felt like winning her over wasn't going to be some kind of big ordeal. It came the next day when she was at work again, so I set up the little camera in our baby's room. If the lights are on, it's very easy to notice, but when the blinds are drawn or the light is off, it's not that easy to see it. The camera connects to the Wi-Fi, and I can use an app on my phone to check the monitor no matter where I am, which is pretty cool. After setting it up, I went right back to work, and honestly, I somehow forgot to tell her about it when she got back. The very next day was one of those few days where I had a bunch of errands to run, and I kind of looked forward to it because it was one of the times where I was entirely free of parental duties, even if just for a few hours at a time. When I was about to leave the house, my wife begged that I take the baby along, saying she was exhausted from the week and just needed to have some time to herself. I won't lie, I was a bit bummed at that. But this wasn't the first time that she asked me to take the baby along, and I wasn't able to the last time she asked, so this time around, I agreed. I took my daughter and all of her needed things and started to run the errands for the day. I was halfway through the list of things that I was meant to do that day, and my daughter had been well behaved the entire day. So it honestly wasn't a bad day by any measure, well, until a point. It was when I was sitting in my car eating some fast food that I had bought that I got a notification on my phone from the baby monitor app. It had detected activity, and my first thought was that my wife went into the baby's room to do something because that's the logical assumption to make. I pulled out my phone and opened the app, and I saw my wife and another man grappling in the baby's room. My heart leaped in my chest. Honestly, it looked like my wife was being assaulted by this man, and I can't describe how quickly I switched on the car. The only thing was that I started to hear sounds, and that was when I realized that my wife was far from being assaulted. It became clear that this man and my wife were making out in my daughter's room. Looking back, I'm still shocked at how rapidly my concern for her turned to fiery hate, but I don't know why I couldn't stop watching. At one point, I had the common sense to record my screen so I could have evidence of what was going on. I saw the man's hand go under her blouse, and then soon after try to take off her underwear. It was then that I heard her moan, and I literally watched as the man bent Naomi over the edge of the crib. I think it was then that I just tossed the phone aside. I wanted to scream, and I wanted to punch something, but I had to keep my composure because my daughter was sleeping. But do you know how helpless I felt in that moment? I wanted to drive back home so badly. I wanted to go back there and hurt him and hurt her, but the only thing that held me back from doing something very stupid was my baby. Was that the reason why she asked me to take the baby along? Was this what happens every time she asks me to take the baby with me? Would she have done it even if our daughter was still at home? My wife and another man were being intimate in my daughter's room. And that was the part that disgusted me the most to a level that I struggle to actually describe. By the time I picked up my phone again, the room was empty. I honestly didn't know what to do, and I sat down in the car until my daughter woke up. By then, most of the places I was supposed to go to had closed, and I literally only had one errand left that I could run. I don't know why, but I still went ahead to do it. I think I needed something to take my mind off of it because I knew the alternative was me going home. And I was genuinely scared of what might happen if I went before I got my head on right. Eventually, I went back home, and while she was concerned about me getting back home so late, I made up some stupid excuses that she bought. I really wanted to confront her, but I had to use every ounce of my self-control not to because my emotions were way too charged. I waited until she went to sleep, and I sat in the living room until daytime. This is where I really need help because I'm freaking losing my mind. This was 2 days ago, and I've been struggling not to completely tear into her, especially because I have the advantage of evidence. She noticed the baby monitor yesterday, and I told her that I had just bought it so that she wouldn't suspect that I was onto her. Again, I'm still so disgusted that she did that in our baby's room, and I also don't know how to express how shocking it was to see things play out that way. Especially since I had no idea whatsoever that she was being unfaithful. I wouldn't have guessed it in a million years. I think I'm going to confront her about it, but I really want to be assured that's the best move to make. I want to hear what you all have to say because I'm in the worst position to be making logical decisions right now. Everything I do will be completely fueled by emotion, and I want to avoid that, so let loose, even if it's to call me a fool for not rushing back home right away. Edit. Okay. So, yes, I might be a fool for not rushing home right away, as many of you are pointing out, but honestly, not only was I not in the right mental place to be confronted with my wife and her affair partner, but I had my daughter with me, and I think it wouldn't have been smart for me to take her into such a dangerous atmosphere. My daughter held me back from doing anything stupid at that moment, and I'm still thankful for that because she could have gotten hurt if things went out of control. Edit 2, so the general consensus seems to be that I should confront her already and stop wasting time. So yes, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. I can't keep this inside me for any longer. I also saw some people saying that I should check her phone, but that part will be hard. Her smartphone is almost always on her. I think it is better for me to come at her straight, so that's what I'll do. Just when you thought parenting was all about diapers and midnight feeds, bam! Isn't it ironic how a simple device meant to ensure your baby's safety ended up revealing a plot twist worthy of a suspense thriller? Parenthood throws curveballs, but I bet catching your wife and another man in your daughter's room via baby monitor wasn't in the parenting manual. And of all places, she chooses the baby's room? Really? I feel like a baby room gives more exhausted, covered in baby barf, and hasn't showered in a week vibes, not getting down and dirty with a stranger. Different strokes for different folks, I suppose. Update. So I'm back with an update on the story where I caught my wife cheating on the baby monitor. I confronted her about it, and it feels good to have been able to let out all that emotional baggage, but I'm also very hurt by the entire thing. Let me try my best to recap what happened. That morning when Naomi woke up, I gave her about an hour before I asked her to sit down so that we could talk. She seemed worried and kept asking me if something was wrong, but I didn't say anything in response to that. I started off by telling her when I had bought the baby monitor, but she just looked at me, confused. I said nothing, and she only replied with a drawn-out, okay. Then I told her that the baby monitor was already operational on the day that I ran errands. She still looked at me, confused, and I really didn't want to say anything more. I was simply just looking at her, and I could see the exact moment that she mentally recollected what happened that day. She jumped up slightly in her seat out of shock and covered her mouth. We sat there, her mouth covered like that, for probably a full minute. I could see that she was struggling, trying to figure out what to say, but I really didn't want to give her the opportunity to rehearse something, so I asked her, "Why did you cheat on me with that guy?" She started to cry and kept trying to speak through it, which was making her entirely unintelligible. I asked the question again, and the same thing happened. She didn't have a real answer to that question. Quite obviously, she couldn't use the classic excuse of, "You were never around," because I was always around. I continued my questioning and asked her who the man was. At that point, she started to sob even louder, and it was pissing me off. This went on for almost 10 minutes before she finally started to calm down. I asked the question again, and it took her 2 minutes of shaking and burying her head in her palms before she finally spoke. "He's nobody important." "He was important enough to be able to get into your panties," I snapped back. "He's just some guy who came by the store. He wanted to buy flowers for his." I already knew what the next word was, but I waited for her to finish, "for his wife." I laughed at that because not only was she cheating on me with a nobody in our daughter's room, but she was also messing around with a married man as a married woman herself. It actually disgusted me. There's no other word that I can use to describe it. I asked her what his name was. At first, she said she didn't know, but I told her that was a lie. I knew that she knew at least his first name, if not both. Eventually, she told me his name, and I made a very solid mental note of that. Let's call him John Carpenter for fun. It was a more unique name than that, though. Then the last question I asked was, "Why did you have to do something so disgusting in our daughter's room? Do you have no morals?" I mean, obviously not, but I still had to ask her. It was infuriating every time I thought about it. She didn't say anything, and I was honestly shocked by the next thing that she said, and it is still as bafflingly stupid now as it was then. You didn't even wait for me to say yes to a baby monitor." I blew up at her. "So now it's my fault? Because if I didn't buy the baby monitor, you would still be able to have sex with a man in our daughter's room right against her crib? I'm the villain because you were cheating with somebody who just happened to buy flowers in your store, a man with a wife, and you're boiling this down to me buying a baby monitor without asking you? You're pathetic." After that, she started to sob again, and I felt a lot better. I didn't feel back to normal, because it's hard to feel okay again so quickly after something like what I had gone through goes down, but yeah, it felt like some weight off my shoulders. For now, I've kicked Naomi out of the house, and I don't know how to proceed. I know divorce is a must, but somehow it really isn't enough for me. I need to do more and hurt her beyond that. I just need help figuring out the best way I can potentially do that, so I'm open to all the suggestions that I can get. Update 2. I'm back, months after the fact, and I'm the happiest that I've been in a very long time. I was the guy who made the post about my wife Naomi, who I caught cheating on me thanks to a baby monitor that I bought. I'm glad to bring you all one new update and what should be the final one in this entire story. I knew that I wanted to hurt Naomi badly. So I read through all the comments on my previous post and took my sweet time to formulate a plan. The first thing that I went for was the divorce. That was easy. My close friend's wife is a divorce attorney, and she's freaking good at what she does, so I enlisted her services. The same day that I confronted Naomi, I had the video evidence of her cheating, and I was told that it was going to come in useful for the trial. The fact that she had to ask me to take the baby that day also showed that she had planned to cheat, and it was very likely not the first time either. When the divorce papers were ready, I specifically gave out Naomi's work address, which is that same corner shop that I lent to her to use for her business. I wanted her to be embarrassed, and while I wasn't there to watch her get served, I hoped that it was a bad look for her, and for the customers that must have been there at the time. She called me the same day that she was served, begging that we talk things over. I told her there was literally nothing for us to talk about because she wouldn't have anything more to say to me than several sorries. And that was the last thing I wanted to hear. When it was time for the divorce proceedings to begin, the first thing that her lawyer wanted to go after was the store. Its ownership transferred to me after my uncle died, and that was the asset that she was fighting tooth and nail for. We had a car, though not a fantastic one, and we rented an apartment, clearly the most valuable thing we owned between the two of us. I think that was very clear to the judge as well. In fact, that was the one thing that I knew I had to have. My lawyer, bless her soul, really drove home not only how disgusting my wife's cheating so soon after having her first child was, but all the other aspects that made it worse. Like the premeditation, the fact that this probably wasn't the first time, She said that giving her that corner store would be like rewarding her bad behavior, and that wouldn't set a good example. At the end of the day, I got it all, though I gave up the car since I was keeping the apartment. The judge said that it would help with coming to pick up or drop off the child. The custody part didn't go as nicely as I would have wanted, since we ended up with joint custody, but it's fine. I also don't need to pay her a dime because, thankfully, in my state, her infidelity was allowed to play a major part in the judgment. Here's the part where I was finally able to heal my wounds. Remember John Carpenter, the man that my ex-wife cheated on me with? I found him on Facebook. It took me 2 minutes to find his wife, and I messaged her. I explained the whole situation, including the fact that I had explicit footage of her husband and my wife. She said she was interested in seeing it since she didn't believe me at first. She certainly believed me after. I had to do a lot of consoling, but it seems like things are going to hit the rocks on that side of the sea, and that makes me happy. Poor her though, she'll end up better off eventually, at least like I have. The next thing was letting my ex-wife know that she had 30 days to vacate the store. I walked into the store and told her this face-to-face over a month after we divorced because I wanted her to let her guard down, and it worked beautifully. She cried and even offered to start paying rent for her spot, but I said no. My eventual plan was to rent the place out, but I absolutely refused to make her my tenant. Nah, I needed to make sure that her lovely shop was no more. Sure, she could carry her brand elsewhere, but at least then she'd need to pay a lot to make it work, and that is fine by me. As I type this, the store is vacant, and I'm looking for a proper paying tenant. Her Instagram page still says that the store is closed indefinitely for renovation, but I'm glad that I know that's a lie. She's trying to save face, but it's not working very well, as it is now very evident that the physical location is no more. She's called me about 3 times in the past month simply to ask me to forgive her and let her use the store again, but I'm not swaying on that, not at all. And it makes me glad. This is really the happiest I've been in a while, and it sucks that it has to come through revenge, but it is what it is. I'm glad I got to hit back at her in the end, and I'm glad it is hurting her just a fraction of the amount that it hurt me. Wow, you've really turned the tables on Naomi with surgical precision, OP. Serving divorce papers at her own workplace, that's what we like to see. As for the store, turning down her offer to pay rent was a power move. I can almost hear the evil landlord laugh echoing through the empty storefront. Her Instagram renovation excuse is classic, like saying a sinking ship is just a brief dip underwater for maintenance. It's good to hear you're finding closure, even if it's through unconventional means. Just remember, living well is the best revenge. And hey, if you need help finding the proper paying tenant, maybe consider someone who really values privacy in their business affairs. What do you think? Have you found pleasure in revenge? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today.
I'm 47, and my wife is 45. We've been married for 22 years, and we have 3 kids, a 20-year-old son and 2 daughters, 18 and 16. On September 11, 2001, my wife planned to meet a man she met online at a nearby hotel. They had been texting and exchanging pictures for months. At that time, we had been married for 2 years, and our son was not even a year old. Surprisingly, the only thing that stopped her was the Trade Center's attack. Her uncle was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, and it was almost certain he died on impact. The entire country was mourning, and she took it hard. I sympathized with her and was there to console her. After some crying, she confessed her plan, expressed regret, and showed me proof that they hadn't gone beyond emotional conversations. Before the confession, I had a gut feeling something was wrong, but I never thought she would have an emotional affair. This shocked me because I thought she wasn't that type of person, having grown up in a sheltered environment. She confessed that she regretted her actions and changed her mind. She apologized and showed me proof that things hadn't progressed beyond an emotional connection. Before the confession, I suspected something, but I had no idea it was an emotional affair. It was shocking because I believed she wasn't that kind of person. She grew up in a sheltered environment, not allowed to party, drink, or go on dates, and she felt like she missed out. When we started our relationship, she told me I was her first, and I believed her. However, after her confession on September 9th, I wasn't so sure. If she would go this far, what else was she hiding? If not for Osama bin Laden, she might have gone through with it, and I would never have known. The fact that she came clean without me finding out contributed to my willingness to reconcile, with the condition of her getting counseling. Additionally, I saw no proof of a physical affair. I remembered how the entire experience crushed me. Despite canceling the plan, she was remorseful and did the right things. It took a long time, but eventually, the pain faded into a memory. Trust, however, is like a clean sheet of paper. When damaged, it becomes deformed with infidelity, like crumpling it into a ball. You can smooth it out, but it will never be as pure as new. Trust became a personal issue for me. Even as I got comfortable with the reconciliation, I still had to check on my own just to be sure. She passed those checks, smoothing things out somewhat, but it was never perfect again. Then, 19 years later, on October 14th, 2019, with 2 more beautiful children, I had a gut feeling. I hate having gut feelings. One Monday morning, she had an argument with our 18-year-old daughter. Later that day, I made my daughter laugh, but my wife, still upset, left the house. She turned off her location sharing, raising my suspicions. The trust that had never fully restored needed reassurance, so I kept trying to check her phone, computer, and anything else that might be helpful. The next day, we had to get a passport for our youngest at the post office. She was aloof, constantly on her phone, and I made a mental note to check it out later. Usually she left her phone around, but lately she carried it everywhere, another unsettling feeling. We bought her an iPad, and she locked it with a passcode, which surprised me. We don't usually use passcodes, and although she explained it was for work, doubts remained. On Friday, we closed on a home equity loan at the bank, and she said she had to run an errand. Checking her check-ins, I found out one stop was at an adult store. I looked for items when I had the chance and found a nice piece of lingerie. Our bed life had been stagnant due to her lack of interest, prompting her to look for information on female desire issues. Curiosity led me to monitor what I could. Finally, I got the passcode to her iPad and discovered explicit Facebook messages with a guy. Even though they weren't friends on Facebook, she responded as if she knew him. The conversation turned explicit, and when he suggested she drop her daughter off and come over, she declined, saying, "My stories aren't set up like that." Instead of holding on to this information and its source to get a clearer picture, I ended up confronting her that evening, which was a big mistake. It was too soon because she lied and took the affair underground. She said the lingerie was for us, claiming she was building up the courage to wear it for me. She also said the guy on Facebook was a summer co-worker who started messaging her out of the blue. She swore there was no physical contact, just texting. I want to believe that, but it's hard for me. I insisted it had to end completely, and she agreed immediately. The next day I asked if it ended, and she said yes. Unbeknownst to her, I could see their messages through other means. She lied, and now, after 19 years, it's happening again. My emotions are a mess. I can't eat or sleep and have a hard time concentrating. I'm starting counseling this week and hitting the gym more. This situation sucks, and I don't want to go through it. I've been reading the 180 almost daily since D-Day. I pulled it off well for a couple of days, but today was rough. I got almost no sleep last night. Our son, who works at a local theater, gave us tickets to come from away. We had to pretend everything was great to not disappoint him. At 20, he's a great kid. If you're not familiar with the show, it deals with the trading center story, and it was tough. I've kept a journal, observing dates, times, and my thoughts. I've come up with a mantra. Keep cool, keep patient, keep control. I need to be more consistent, but it's something I've been trying to get to. I've gotten into a better headspace. Now we have to go shopping tonight, and I want to practice the 180 as best as I can. Fast forward to July 3rd, 2021. My investigation revealed her contact with other men through the summer school program where she works as a teacher's aide. He's the gym teacher. Affair partner is 32 years old. The wayward wife is 47, making her a cougar, I guess. The fair partner is a gym teacher at a nearby school, and his wife works at a different school, not even in the same district. The wayward wife met him while they were working at summer school. Summer school here is run in a few districts, so teachers from different districts work together. I found out he would be there again, observed quietly, and caught a suggestive Facebook message. He rejected her, which made me chuckle. I've actually come to believe he sees her as a friend and doesn't want to get involved. She's 47, about 15 years older than him. I'm not completely done yet, but I can see it from here. Given the magnitude of the life change, I need to know. I am setting up my Intel network, voice-activated recorder, GPS, electronic passcode, and so on. I want as close to incontrovertible proof as I can have before I pull the trigger. I've also been reading up on and taking notes on divorce laws in my state, I will be contacting lawyers as well. I have a few friends who have been recently divorced, and I will be hitting them up for any advice too. Then, I conspicuously collected some DNA samples from my 3 children to make sure that they are mine, just for peace of mind. By far, the hardest thing that I've ever done. Regardless of the results, I will love them unconditionally. As for what I'm waiting for, well, I go from thinking we're done to maybe often enough that I know I have to have it break me in the face hard enough, and it hasn't yet. I also feel like I don't want to put my kids through it, even though they are older, unless it's pretty cut and dry. This is a part of me that ghoulishly enjoys hearing her on the voice-activated recorder complain about the latest development. He unfriended a lot of people in the last days or two. Yes, I snooped there too, and she's not too happy about it. And I know this isn't going to go over well, but she's been going through what I call a midlife crisis over the last year or so. She also lost her mom back in November, and we are having the funeral tomorrow. She's also taking it very hard. 2 days after her mom passed, we lost my dad. Over the next 3 weeks, she lost 2 more relatives. Then it was Christmas. My family has faced a lot of tragedy recently, and I see it's deeply affecting her. In the back of my mind, I thought maybe this is a result of those events. Perhaps I should create more space between our losses and the potential pain of divorce. I'm willing to endure it a bit longer for my kids and family. Holding out before making that decision is tough. After 26 years together, giving up isn't easy, especially considering the depth of love I've felt for her throughout most of our marriage. I can't argue with that. My plan is to spend this week checking out divorce attorneys. We have a birthday party for my daughter next Sunday, and after that, I plan to confront her. I don't know exactly what I'll say, but I'll let her know I've consulted an attorney and I'm ready to press the divorce button. While I'd love for her to have a realization moment, I won't continue the marriage after collecting evidence of her affair. On February 11th, 2022, I installed a voice-activated recorder in her car. Listening to the recording made me note the effects I'd feel and how to deal with them. Sleeplessness, use PM and melatonin, nervous energy, hit the gym, lack of appetite, knock off those extra pounds, difficulty concentrating, write everything down and recite common tasks. I forgot about night sweats until they happened, then prepared with towels and fresh clothes. Relief followed, knowing no more spying or walking on eggshells. Before I actually told her, I knew she was treating me like things were wonderful in our lives for the last few months. She was upset over receiving a box of her late mother's things from her dad to sort out. It didn't affect me. I felt no sympathy, grief, or sorrow at seeing her upset. When the confrontation finally occurred, after her prodding and pushing, "What's wrong? Tell me what's bothering you." All I did was say his name and the words, "I know." She got flustered and stormed out of the house. I don't have to worry about her anymore. I don't have to feel on edge when she's around, as if I had to act a certain way or make sure I accomplish certain tasks. As for the recent developments with her, something seemed off. We were getting along a little too well. She was almost too nice to me. Things that would normally annoy her suddenly didn't. At first I thought she was finally happy, but eventually it nagged at me, and I decided to become the marriage police. I installed a voice-activated recorder on her car and got the GPS in there. Again. I went fishing and I caught something on my first cast. The recording contained 2 phone calls. The first was of him as she was driving out to meet him. They ended up in a church parking lot, really for about 40 minutes. She went to his car, so I was spared having to listen to that. The next call was to her sounding board friend who lives halfway across the country. If the call to him wasn't enough, and I have no doubt I could have found wiggle room in that if I really wanted to keep my blinders on, then the call to her sealed the deal. The conversation that eventually happened between us was a familiar story here, primarily gaslighting and blame shifting. Apparently, her affair was my fault because she resents things she never got to do in her life. She didn't go to college or have a wild single life before we got married, and of course it's my fault and she resented me for it. I told her I refused to accept her idea that her affair was my fault, and I had told her a while ago that if she wanted out, then let's end it, and she chose to stay. So no, this is all about her. I will accept some responsibility for not being the perfect husband, but I certainly wasn't married to the perfect wife. I certainly didn't deserve this. So I'm calling a few divorce friends for attorney recommendations and any strategic advice that they might have. I am finally ready to end it. I have finally learned my lesson. My wayward wife has shown she doesn't deserve what it takes to reconcile, and I don't want to sign up for another affair in a few months or years, so I'm joining the divorce side. Is there any secret handshake or something I should learn? I am still in the whirlwind of emotion. I break a wall, but luckily, neither the wall nor I got hurt. I yelled, "Forget her!" loudly in my house. Thankfully, no one else was home, so when my best friend called to check on me, I broke down sobbing. I daydream about a magical reconciliation for her. Would it be so bad if we stayed together? Maybe if I tried a little harder, she'd be happy. But my head knows this is nonsense, and getting a divorce is the right move. I've said it to my mom, my friends, and myself many times in the last couple of days since D-Day. We've mostly avoided each other, and I really miss her. We used to text during the day, share our work experiences, and have random hugs and kisses at home. All of that has stopped, and, as I mentioned, we stay away from each other in the house. Now, she sleeps on the couch instead of the bed. One of my simple pleasures in the morning was gently waking her up when our alarm went off by rolling over, rubbing her back or arm and whispering, "Hey honey, it's that time," which was always followed by an almost inaudible response that always brought a smile to my face. She hasn't left yet. We haven't split yet, but I know what I have to do. I just know it won't be easy. Can you please tell me there is light at the end of this long, dark, lonely tunnel? Our children had the opportunity to travel and do some pretty cool things with their involvement in this cool musical group. She's jealous and has expressed it because she never got to do any of that. Newsflash, neither did I. I'm not jealous, but I'm happy that my kids have more than I did. I've spent the last 20 years in a fairly popular local band, playing at some pretty nice events. She's jealous of those opportunities, though. She dismisses the hours of practice and study it took to get in a place to be able to do this thing. Although I can tell you how many times she shared stories with me of people she met at work who heard us or followed us. It's like she feels like a big deal because she's married to one of the members. She even had to talk to someone in the doctor's office after overhearing them talking about the gig we were doing that night. She complained that I left her alone with the kids when I went out to play. Well, I was working and I came home with money in my pocket. I did have fun. Yes, playing music in front of people is exhilarating. Shifting gears, dealing with bar owners, staying on top of timing and crowd reaction. At work, though, getting up at 5 a.m., working a full day, then gigging and not getting home until 2 a.m. made for a long day. Also not fun, but we needed the money because of the house she wanted to build. Leaving the group was simply not an option. She worked too, but I earned almost as much just gigging as she did at her regular job, which also made her upset, and my real job paid 3 to 4 times hers. So I worked hard to give my family the life I thought they deserved, and what I got was resentment. The old saying that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time is indeed true. It took me too long to see who I married. I came to the same conclusion. If we stay together, I am signing up for not being around. I've gotten a couple of attorney references and will be setting up appointments soon. I just don't see a path that doesn't end in divorce. There's really nothing left to work with. The funny thing is, people who know her outside of the home think she's a wonderful person, warm, caring, and a terrific mom. Someone who goes above and beyond to help others. And she does all that. But inside the house, it's a different story. She's definitely suffered from what I call the poor me syndrome. He's a coworker married to another coworker. I haven't told her family. All she has left is her dad and his sister. I don't really talk to them much, but I might tell him at least at some point. I've reached out to the other betrayed spouse, but she hasn't responded. I'll send another email in a couple of days with details and then leave her alone if I don't hear anything back. So tonight, I told her I want a divorce. She wanted a hug and to cry, but those times are over. She understood. We talked wistfully about how we wish things were different. I asked her, "Didn't you realize that this was going to happen when you were doing it?" She did, but she's still very upset. I feel bad. I still love this woman, but I can't be with her anymore. I don't want to do this, but I have to. A few years down the road, I'll feel better knowing I'm free. The band is on hiatus at the moment, but I have a few irons in the fire to keep me playing. We play classic rock with horns, Chicago, etc. I play trumpet. I have my sights set on that day. I know I'm starting down a rough road, but I'm confident I'll come out in good shape. She left a door open for counseling, but I shut it down, although I urged her to get counseling anyway. The only thing I can blame myself for right now is not ending things earlier. I've done nothing else wrong in the last few years. On the contrary, I've tried to be the model husband and make her the most important thing in my life. And yet, here I am again. I keep wanting to keep my marriage, but then I remember why I can't. It's a sad thing, really, and as much as anything else, it shows me that I'm ready to let go. I reached out to the other betrayed spouse via email, but got no response. So at the advice from a different thread, I called her and broke it to her. I've never felt like such a mess in my life. I know I didn't do anything but tell her what she needed to know, yet she was heartbroken, and I felt responsible. It was like finding out all over again. I broke the poor woman's heart. I know I didn't, but she thanked me. That wasn't easy to do. We talked more, and I'll guide her to this site for support. It helped me greatly. I also told her that even though we've never met, I'll be there for her. She can call or text me anytime. She was helpful to me, comparing notes and making sense of the situation. Just got off the phone with her. I feel much better about telling her now. She thanked me, and I feel I did the right thing, even though it was hard. We chatted more, and I'll direct her to this site for support. It's been a great help for me. I assured her I'm here for her, even though we haven't met. She can call or text me anytime. She was helpful to me too, comparing notes and making sense of the situation. Just finished a phone call with her, and I feel better about opening up. She thanked me, and I believe I did the right thing. It was tough, but I wanted to hear about his behavior. He seemed to create a story of an unhappy marriage to gain sympathy. I'm not ignoring her role, but she might have been manipulated with things she wanted to hear. My wife is unaware I exposed the affair partner, affecting 2 families and 6 children. Looking at a parent and wondering how they could do that is tough. Just have her compare paychecks. That's what's been happening. I only talk to her about kids or household matters. I mostly avoid being in the same room as her. The house is cold, and she's slowly realizing she's gone too far. I'm calling lawyers, gathering friends for support, and making plans to leave. I don't think she's quite out of her daze yet. I'm distancing myself as much as I can. We only talk if she initiates, and it's about the house, kids, or money. Trust me, she's starting to get it. She might expect me to act like nothing happened or to do the pick-me dance. In the past, that's what happened. I didn't really stand up to her and assert my demands to stay together. I was content to let it slide with a few apologies and a bit of excess. Now I'm doing my best at the 180, minimizing communication to essential matters. No chit-chat, no asking how you're doing or telling me about your day. None of that. I think she's having a hard time with my hands-off approach. She's incapable of accepting blame for her actions, choosing to play the sufferer. It's a bit sad. She doesn't realize why I share blame for problems in the marriage. This falls entirely on her shoulders. I know the why may never be answered, but the questions will always remain. Tonight was good. We went to my youngest daughter's high school musical. It was fun, but my wife sat next to my mom, who doesn't know she knows. The other betrayed spouse texted me during the show. Memories haunt me, and every time I wishfully hope we can stay together, I think about how I would just be here again in a few months. I'm more and more resolved on divorce. I know it sounds silly at this point. It should be absolutely unquestionable, and the only way forward at this point. But I still reflect on our life and family, wishing we could fix everything and move on. But those moments are just moments. I guess it's part of the process because they only last for moments. And then the reality that she's not worth staying with reasserts itself. I think that's progress, as the question has been asked here so many times. Why? What has caused this seemingly normal person, brought up in a very Christian home and proud of her Christianity, to do something so utterly abhorrent to the very idea and moral boundaries she learned from her earliest childhood? Why? The big finale happened tonight. I tracked her to the parking lot, where her car sat for a while, then went to a store and returned to the lot. As she sat there, I wondered what the hell was going on. I figured she was with him, so I went to check it out. Sure enough, there was her car with his right next to it. I called his wife. We've been talking for a few days, and she suggested I go say hi and grab a picture, so I did. I told her not to come home tonight. Heading home afterward, She called me in tears saying she's sorry. I agreed to let her come and grab her things so she can be gone for a bit. So now all questions are answered, and the story has been written onto the next phase of this little journey. But not so fast. The DNA results of my 3 children have been sitting in the storage where we store our mail for everyone to collect. I had already forgotten about it. It's been sitting there for a couple of weeks. I don't receive a lot of paper mail, which is why I forgot. Maybe because I didn't care to check because I thought they were all mine. But unfortunately, my first son isn't mine. I was so shocked to my core. I didn't expect that she must have been cheating on me during the first years of our marriage. My heart is shattered into different pieces, and I know I have to break the sad news to my children. I'm not going to hide secrets from my children. So I told my son last night. Lots of hugging, lots of crying. My soon-to-be ex-wife was still out of the house since I caught her having an affair with the partner in his car. He's not my biological son, but I have raised him, so he is mine. He's 20 and a man that every father would be proud of. He's not ready to confront his mom. I called my soon-to-be ex-wife on her phone and told her about it. All she did was cry and apologize. She said she wanted to come home, but I told her that it would be a good idea for her to remain wherever she is for the foreseeable future. Truth be told, I feel pretty good. DNA or not, he's still my son. I've never been this close to my kids, and I tell them I love them every day. I'm more relaxed now, and it's over. No more lying, no more worrying. My kids and I are still recovering, but we are at peace. In the coming days, we'll go through emotions, but I see a clear path out of this now.
Life used to feel simpler. Back when I was juggling writing gigs and Liz was just starting her career, we were newlyweds full of hope, working to build a stable future. Our days were hectic, but we still dreamed of the family we'd raise. I was finding my footing as a freelancer, and Liz hadn't yet climbed the corporate ladder, but we were content in each other's company. Then the kids came, Derek and Lila, and our priorities shifted. I took on more at home while Liz's career soared. What I thought was a temporary setup turned permanent. And while I managed the house, Liz thrived at work. Over time, I began to resent it. I had hoped it was just a phase, but years later, we were still stuck in the same routine. Sitting by the window, I realized I was about to do something out of character. Liz, now 33, ran an office with confidence, managing a housewares company. Though she preferred Elizabeth, I always called her Liz. Her career success didn't bother me, especially since the company owner was a family friend. I earned my living writing articles and essays. Not much, but it was steady, though Liz's salary had long since outpaced mine. When we had the kids, Derek is now 11 and Lila is 13, Liz worked right up until the end of her pregnancies and went back to work quickly. We had a part-time nanny until the kids started school, but I eventually took over most of the cooking and housework. It didn't bother me at first. I was home and things needed to be done. But over time it became expected, and Liz never offered to share the load. A few years ago, I even suggested hiring help, but nothing changed. We just fell into this routine, and I went along with it. Now, I'm starting to wonder if it's time for a change. I loved my kids and had their respect, though they always seemed uncomfortable when I showed them affection. We weren't a touchy-feely family. Liz made sure of that. I blamed her for the lack of warmth, and our physical relationship was limited to one predictable night a week. It hit me 2 years ago. What a dull life I was living. Something had to change. Those were my thoughts from the past, but tonight, as I waited for Liz to come home, I realized nothing had changed. I prepared dinner, and Liz soon arrived, telling me her mom was coming over. "Arthur, my mom's coming for dinner. Dad's at the lodge," she said. I set another plate, already sensing a fight brewing. "I know you don't like my mom, but could you be civil?" she asked. I nodded. She kept going. "Your body language says too much. She has feelings, you know." I nodded again, while the kids stayed quiet. Liz began complaining about work, dealing with customers when her boss wasn't around. "Kids, see what I have to put up with? If Calder sells me the business, things will change," she rambled. As Liz kept talking, I decided not to wait for her mom. "I'm eating now. The roast will get cold." I started serving the food just as her mom, Iris, walked in, visibly annoyed. I met her eyes and did something I'd never done before. I dropped my gaze to her cleavage and wiggled my eyebrows. She looked shocked. I smiled and then patted her on the back when she started coughing, my hand lingering on her neck. She shuddered. "Arthur, stop that. What's gotten into you?" she snapped. "Nothing," I replied. Liz told me to be more friendly. I don't like it. You must be crazy, she said. I laughed. Everyone's a little crazy sometimes. I let it go. Neither Liz nor the kids saw anything unusual, just me trying to help. Liz got up to get her mom some water, and when she turned away, I glanced again at Iris's chest. Iris crossed her arms, and when I smiled, she quickly left the house. Liz called after her, but Iris kept shaking her head and walked out. Liz stormed back, accusing me of driving her mother away. Dad didn't do anything, Derek defended me. Grandma's been acting weird since she got here. She said Dad was crazy, but I think she's the one who's off. Don't call your grandmother crazy, Liz snapped. Let's just eat. I'll take her dinner later. After we finished, I said, Liz, can you and Lila handle cleanup tonight? I've got an interview at Casey's bar in half an hour. Not sure when I'll be back. I turned to Lila, joking. Mind if I get a hug from my favorite daughter? Dad, I'm your only daughter, she laughed, hugging me. I offered Derek a handshake, and he took it with a smile. In the kitchen, Liz was loading the dishwasher. I'll be home later. How about moving date night up to tonight? I asked with a grin. No way. You know the routine. Mom thinks you're crazy, and I do too. Just go. I don't care if you come back at all. I shrugged, grabbed my things, and walked past Casey's bar to a waiting taxi. It took me out to the city's edge where several motels lined the strip. In the taxi, I was Arthur Franklin, husband to Liz, father to Derek and Lila. When I stepped out, I became Tommy Franklin, close friend of Beatrice Collins. 2 years ago, I was sent to interview Beatrice, a new widow whose husband died in a motorcycle crash. She was 7 months pregnant, stranded far from home with no family, nearly broke. Mr. Franklin, you look so much like my husband, it's eerie, she had said through tears. I stayed with her for 3 hours, listening to her story. She was 7 years younger than me and completely lost. Before leaving, I told her not to give up hope. I'll write your story and find a charity to help you. I wrote the articles and donations poured in. Beatrice found a home with an elderly woman named Vera, who had recently lost her own daughter. As Beatrice approached her due date, I told her to let me know when the baby was coming. I felt good about helping her. A few months passed, and I visited Beatrice occasionally. When she went into labor, I left Liz a note saying I had an interview out of town. I made it to the hospital in time to be with Beatrice as the baby was born. I even held her son, Alex, before he was taken to the nursery. Over the years, I continued to visit Beatrice, but never more than once a month. I wasn't in love with her, but I enjoyed her company, and I adored the baby. After 2 years, Vera left to visit her sister, and Beatrice asked me if I could stay overnight. Tommy, I need to talk about my future, Beatrice said. I'm almost 25, and life's slipping by. You should think about your own future, too. I know you're unhappy at home. Okay, I replied. I can get away for a few days. We'll figure something out. Beatrice then looked at me and asked, Will you kiss me before you go? I've waited months for this. I hesitated. You're okay kissing a married man? I am, she said softly. Come here. Later that night, I told Liz, I'm going to be out of town for a few days. Fine by me, Liz replied casually. Dad will take the kids somewhere. He really cares for them. I'll be busy too. There were no questions from her about when I'd be home, where I was going, or whether it was work-related. I'll be gone at least 3 days. I'll be back when you get off work Friday, I told her. Why not stay out until Saturday? What about Friday night? That's our night together, Liz asked. We'll skip it. It's been 3 weeks since we've been together anyway. Oh, Arthur, stop it. We have 2 kids, and I don't want to risk getting pregnant. I don't care if we ever have sex again, she responded sharply. Damn it, Liz, I said, feeling the frustration rise. I'm 32. I'm not going the rest of my life without closeness. Then find it somewhere else. You'll get it from me when I feel like it, and that's it, she snapped. I stared at her, shocked she'd even suggest changing our usual night. Was that guilt on her face? I didn't like having this conversation in front of the kids. Fine, Saturday night it is, I finally said. I'll be home in the afternoon and maybe take you to dinner. The kids can come too. No, Dad's taking the kids. You can take me out, and we'll discuss things later, she said, already dismissing the conversation. I left to meet Beatrice Tuesday afternoon, arriving later than planned. She greeted me warmly, looking completely different from Liz, more cheerful and full of life. As we sat down for dinner, I asked her, Does Vera know I'm staying? Yes, she does, Beatrice smiled, though I could sense her guilt. She told me to give you whatever you want. The evening went as expected. Beatrice was more passionate than I had imagined, making me forget about Liz. But in the morning, I felt a wave of guilt. At breakfast, Beatrice asked, "Are you sorry?" "In some ways, yes," I admitted. "I've never cheated on Liz before, and it's bothering me more than I thought. But I felt real love with you." "Tommy, I'm sorry for causing your guilt," she said softly. "Can we just go back to being friends?" "I don't think so," I replied, "but I need some time to figure things out." "You say the sweetest things," she said with a faint smile. "I'm not sorry we did this. I'll let you decide what happens next." From then on, she let me spend time with the baby, and we talked about our lives. Beatrice shared more about her late husband, a carpenter she had followed from job to job. She still had his old van, though it was rarely driven. We took a walk to the store, and I told her more about my life with Liz. Beatrice wasn't shy in her response. "If we end up in a relationship, you'll have to step up as a partner. No demands, but no holding back either." "I'm working on it." "I'm here, aren't I said with a smile. She paused before continuing. "You know, you'll need to settle things with Liz. I'm sure you're thinking about divorce." "I've thought about it," I admitted, "but I have no grounds." "Are you sure?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No woman treats you the way she does without something going on." "I never considered that she might cheat," I said thoughtfully. "But maybe you're right. Talk to her," she suggested. "Maybe it can be fixed." "And what about us?" I asked, searching her eyes. "Doesn't this mean anything?" "It means a lot," she replied softly, "but it's not enough to break up your marriage." A month later, everything changed. After I returned from my 3-day trip, I hired a private investigator. 3 days later, I had photos of Liz with another man. I couldn't see his face, but the evidence was clear. I guess I wouldn't be missing our Friday night date after all. Liz was getting served divorce papers that Friday at work. When Liz came home that evening, she accused me of having a midlife crisis, but didn't seem too upset about being served divorce papers. I didn't mention the investigator's report, saving it for potential issues in the divorce. Surprisingly, Liz agreed to my terms without a fight. I had 2 kids I loved, but I was leaving, knowing they'd be cared for by Liz's father and my parents. Visitation would be allowed, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I had saved a good amount of money and had some promising fiction stories on my laptop. An editor told me my work would sell, so I planned to publish under the name Tom Franklin, dropping Arthur entirely. Liz and I divorced, and I focused on my kids, Lila and Derek. They handled the split well, likely because they saw how Liz treated me. I used my savings to buy Vera's house, where Beatrice was already living. People assumed we were married, but we weren't. Beatrice's son Alex was born after her husband's end of life, and anyone looking at us might think I was his father. As for my own kids, Liz had custody, and I gave up my share of the house to avoid high child support. Liz sold the house and moved in with her parents. Lila, now 15, soon clashed with her grandmother and mother. Tensions flared when Lila's friend discovered her own father was Liz's lover, leading Liz to blame Lila. Lila began spending more time with my parents and eventually moved into my childhood room. Derek, on the other hand, was content bouncing between his 2 sets of grandparents, focusing on skateboarding tricks during his rides between the houses. Both kids were happy, as my dad and Liz's father were lifelong friends, giving Derek plenty of activities to enjoy. After the divorce, I didn't see my kids often, only every other weekend. But when Liz started having trouble with Lila, I began visiting more frequently. Soon I was seeing the kids twice a week. Eventually, I suggested Lila move in with my parents, and she asked if Derek could join her. I met with Liz, who surprisingly agreed to let both kids move in with me. She even offered to pay support, not realizing my financial situation had improved thanks to my writing and Beatrice's growing online business. She was selling Chinese artifacts through an importer, and her business was doing well. Our new living arrangement worked. I wrote in one room, Beatrice handled her sales in another, and we took care of Alex together. We weren't a traditional couple, but friends with benefits. We didn't share a bed unless we felt like it, then went back to our own spaces, satisfied with the arrangement for now. I hadn't told my family about living with a woman, but that had to change when I decided Lila and Derek would live with me. The Wednesday before school ended, I visited my parents and told them, as well as the kids, about my new house. Walter arrived while I was explaining, so he found out too. "This Sunday I'm having a cookout so you can see where Lila and Derek will live," I said. "Walter, should I invite Iris?" "Nah, she wouldn't care. No need to mention it," Walter chuckled. That was fine with me. Mom asked, "What can I bring?" "Maybe a pie or cake," I suggested. "Okay, we'll come early to help set up." "Not necessary," I said. Everything's ready. I use the patio all the time. I then added, Mom, can you start calling me Tommy? I've dropped the name Arthur. Dad chimed in. About time. I've always hated that name. Why did you name me Arthur then? I asked. Ask your mother, Dad replied. Mom sighed, explaining they had a great Uncle Arthur who had helped them out when they were struggling and made them promise to name their next son after him. He's dead now, so the name can be too, she said. We also talked about my brother Oscar, who was in the military. Mom mentioned that Liz had been corresponding with him, which surprised me. It turned out he had been visiting town frequently, staying with Iris and Walter, and even spending time with Liz. Lila quietly confirmed it, saying, I knew he was here recently. I think it's awful what Mom and Uncle Oscar are doing to you, but I wasn't supposed to say anything. I left feeling conflicted. When I got home, Beatrice could tell something was off. I told her, it's nothing really. I just found out Liz was cheating on me with my brother for longer than I thought. I've invited my family over for a cookout on Sunday. Derek and Lila will be staying here for good. Later, I remembered the photos from the private investigator. Looking at them closely, I realized it was Oscar in the photos with Liz, identified by an old scar on his back. That explained why the divorce went smoothly. They wanted to keep their affair quiet. Both Liz's parents and mine likely knew after the divorce. I wasn't sure how to handle this revelation. I didn't want to alienate my parents or let my kids hate their mother. But knowing my brother had betrayed me left me angry and humiliated. Liz had been unfaithful to him as well, from what Lila shared about her dating other men. That night, Beatrice came to my room, offering to talk. I told her about everything, how Lila and Derek were moving in, and how I found out about Liz and my brother. I feel humiliated, and I don't know how I'll act when I see him again. Beatrice reassured me. Don't do anything drastic. It would hurt your family. Focus on moving forward. She was right. Though it was difficult, I knew I had to focus on my kids and leave the past behind. Beatrice then cuddled closer, lightening the mood. You know what happens when you suggest cuddling, don't you? I asked with a smile. I do. That was the plan, she replied playfully. Beatrice had a calming effect on me, especially when my mind was racing. Her warmth helped me forget my troubles that night. The next morning, I was excited about my family meeting her. After Alex was born, she worked hard to get her figure back, and now she looked great, with styled hair and a graceful way about her. As I sat with my coffee, Beatrice caught me staring. Tommy, you're looking right through me. What's on your mind? She asked, amused. Just thinking about you, I said with a grin. If I asked you something important, would you answer honestly? Of course, she said, intrigued. We've been living together for 2 years, and I love Alex like I love Derek and Lila. They'll be moving in soon, and I think you'll get along with them. So I was wondering, should we get married? Beatrice laughed. That's a pretty lukewarm proposal. Can't you do better? I pulled out a ring. Beatrice, will you marry me? Her eyes softened. Tommy, you've made me so happy. When were you thinking? Soon. With the kids moving in, it's best to be married before Liz changes her mind. I bought the ring a month ago, but now it feels more urgent. Beatrice teared up. I would have married you any time. I've loved you since before Alex was born. Great! Let's get the license next week. I'll ask Derek to be my best man. Beatrice smiled. And if Lila likes me, I'll ask her to be my maid of honor. It'll make them feel welcome. That Sunday, I prepared the patio for the family cookout. I was nervous since I hadn't told them about Beatrice and Alex. Around noon, Mom arrived and immediately asked, Who's the child? That's Alex Collins. He and his mom live here with me. You'll meet Beatrice inside, I said. Mom wasn't thrilled, but went inside. Derek and Lila greeted me warmly, and soon they were playing with Alex in the yard. My dad showed up next, and I greeted him. I thought you lived alone? He asked. No, I've been living with Beatrice. She came with the house when I bought it, I explained. Mom and Beatrice then joined us. Beatrice introduced herself to Dad, explaining how I had helped her after her husband died. Dad was surprised to learn about my successful writing career, saying he had read about me recently. As we got ready to eat, Mom mentioned someone else was coming. Yes, Walter Hale, your father-in-law, she said, using my old name. I smiled, correcting her. It's Tommy now, remember? Mom chuckled and agreed, signaling that she was still a bit miffed I'd kept Beatrice a secret, but also showing she was warming to her. As I went to grab drinks, I overheard Beatrice telling my parents, This is the first time I've heard Tommy brag about his writing. Hearing Beatrice's words brought me a sense of satisfaction I hadn't expected. Derek and I brought out the cooler with drinks, and Alex, curious as ever, grabbed a bottle of ale. Beatrice let him try it, knowing he wouldn't like it. Sure enough, after one taste, Alex spit it out and ran to me crying. I calmed him down and sent him off to get the dustpan to clean up. Just then, Walter and Iris arrived. I greeted them, and Iris seemed more reserved than usual. I introduced Beatrice and Alex to them, and Iris looked relieved when Beatrice clarified that Alex wasn't my son and that I had dropped the name Arthur. Iris even said, "Thank God. My daughter hated that name, and I think she started to hate him too." Beatrice smiled at me, and I knew things were off to a good start. Then I made my announcement. "I've asked Beatrice to marry me, and I want Derek to be my best man," Beatrice added, asking Lila to be her maid of honor, which made Lila excited. We talked about the wedding, planned for 2 weeks away, and everyone seemed supportive. It was the first real conversation I'd had with Iris in years, and surprisingly, she seemed more pleasant. Maybe she saw that Derek and Lila were happy, which lightened her attitude. As I grilled hamburgers, the kids played with Alex, who eventually tired out. Lila offered to take him upstairs to bed, which gave me a moment to reflect on how content my children seemed. I hadn't seen them this happy in a long time. Later, Beatrice shared details about her business, explaining how she started with just $100 and had grown it into a profitable venture. Everyone was impressed by her success. With a grin, she teased, "Tommy's slow sometimes. I didn't think he'd ever make a move on me." I defended myself, explaining that Beatrice had just lost her husband when we met, and I didn't want to rush her. When I finally did make a move, I felt guilty. I didn't want to feel like I was replacing one woman with another. Beatrice smiled warmly and added, "Tommy may be slow, but he's thorough." I knew he would always be there for me, and I knew he was considering how Derek and Lila would feel. As I glanced at her, I saw tears forming in her eyes. "Tommy," she said, "I understand you more as time goes on. That's why I said yes when he asked me to marry him," Beatrice said with a smile, sealing the moment with affection and gratitude from everyone around. For a brief moment, I reflected on how different Beatrice's love felt compared to Liz's. The way Beatrice looked at me was genuine, from the heart. Blushing, I shifted my focus to where I did my writing, feeling proud and wanting to impress Lila, Derek, and perhaps Iris. I'd always felt like Iris looked down on me, though she had been surprisingly kind today. When I visited the kids after the divorce, Iris usually avoided me, but today she seemed more open, even friendly. It was time for the grandparents to leave, and after a few tears and hugs, they drove off. My kids stood in the driveway watching them go, then turned back to come inside. Just then, Alex woke up, fussy from his nap. When he saw Lila and Derek, his mood quickly changed, realizing they were here to stay. Lila took charge, offering to help Alex with lunch, and Derek, not wanting to help with potty duty, stuck with Beatrice to learn about her business. Later, we all went upstairs to settle Lila and Derek into their rooms. As we made the beds, Lila asked, "Don't you sleep with Beatrice?" I explained that I hadn't, wanting to wait until we were married. Lila responded bluntly, "You should. Mom and Uncle Oscar don't hesitate, and she brings other men home too." I was shocked, and Lila admitted that Liz had threatened to disown them if they told me. I processed this new information quietly, knowing things had shifted. Liz wasn't my wife anymore, and I had my kids living with me. I still had to deal with my brother Oscar, but that was a battle for another day. After lunch, Beatrice showed everyone how her online business worked, impressing them with her success. She explained how she had started small and built it up with a little help from me. She joked about how slow I'd been to make a move, but I defended myself, saying I'd wanted to respect her grieving process after her husband's end of life. Eventually, I opened my heart to her, and everything fell into place. Wednesday, the women went dress shopping, so I took Derek to get a suit for the wedding. When we returned, a large Harley-Davidson was parked in the driveway. A man introduced himself as Jimmy Stein, Beatrice's stepbrother. He explained he had been in trouble and recently got out, now trying to rebuild his life. Jimmy hadn't seen Beatrice in a while and wanted to check in, making sure she was with a good man. I invited him to stick around until she returned, and we chatted about his past, including how he used to ride with Beatrice and her late husband, Luke. Jimmy admitted he was struggling to find work but hoped to get back into the bike business. I suggested he attend our wedding, though he hesitated, saying he didn't have anything decent to wear. I offered to help him get some new clothes, telling him to keep his leather vest. After all, that was who he was. I knew Beatrice would be pleased to see her brother again. When Jimmy finally stood up, I realized how big he really was. 6'5" and towering over me. Wow, Beatrice lucked out, I thought. We headed back into town and returned before the women arrived. Jimmy was eager to find a job, so I gave him a note from my friend and sent him off. He left his new clothes in my old room. Derek wanted to ride on the bike with him, but I said no. It was too soon. When the women returned, Beatrice was excited about her wedding dress. Derek told Lila about Jimmy, and I overheard him say, "Maybe we can ride motorcycles once we know him better." After everyone left, I told Beatrice that Jimmy would be staying for the wedding. She was thrilled and jumped into my arms. She asked where he was, and I explained he was out looking for work but would be back soon. Later, as Alex fell asleep in my arms, we heard Jimmy's Harley pull into the driveway. Derek, worried, asked if he didn't get the job. I reassured him and asked Beatrice to invite Jimmy in, knowing he must be hungry. I watched from the window as Beatrice and Jimmy reunited, exchanging a brief kiss on the cheek. Beatrice wiped away happy tears, and they came inside together. Jimmy shook my hand and thanked me for the job lead, saying Greg had hired him after a long interview. He added that my note was what secured the job, and he was determined to prove I was right about him. We offered him dinner, but Jimmy declined the beer, explaining he didn't drink anymore. Curious as ever, Derek asked what prison was like. I scolded him, but Jimmy said it was fine to answer. Jimmy explained that his size protected him in prison, but the real punishment was losing his freedom. He described the daily routine, being confined in a small space, and the demeaning treatment from guards. He got through it by not fighting the system and staying focused on getting out. Lila, who had been quietly listening, finally asked, "Why did you go to prison?" Jimmy nodded and explained, "I'm not a bad person, but all prisoners say that. Luke, Beatrice's first husband, was my best friend, and we were part of a gang. Beatrice was different from the other women, good and kind. One night, 4 drunk guys cornered her and Luke, trying to hurt her. I arrived in the middle of the fight, and Luke was losing. I intervened and seriously injured 2 of them. Unfortunately, one of them was related to the local district attorney, and I got 5 years in prison. I paid my debt, but I've lost rights, like voting and owning a firearm," Jimmy continued, expressing happiness about Beatrice getting married again, though he didn't know about Alex until that day. He was glad to meet me and my family, and was determined to be part of their lives. After a pause, he added with a chuckle, "I guess I talk a lot." "Does that answer your question, Derek?" Derek, humbled, nodded. "Yes, it does." Beatrice smiled, saying, "Jimmy, you sound more educated than I remember." Jimmy explained how a former teacher in the prison library helped him learn and got him a motorcycle repair manual, which gave him the confidence to apply for the bike shop job. He reflected on the challenges of reintegrating into society, admitting that many former inmates face closed doors, which can lead them back into crime. I encouraged him, "With your attitude, I doubt that'll happen to you." Jimmy smiled and said, "Thanks. People like you can help prevent that." He shifted the conversation to me, asking about my life, and I shared my story while Beatrice filled in details. Jimmy listened carefully, even when Lila mentioned the troubles that led to my divorce, though it made him a bit uncomfortable. Later, as we wandered outside, Jimmy noticed the old barn on the property and asked about it. I told him it was unused. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Would you mind if I rented it?" Surprised, I asked, "The barn?" "Yeah, I could fix it up, live in the loft, and maybe turn the stable into a repair shop." "I don't want to hang around your house all the time," Jimmy explained. I looked at the barn and agreed. "Go ahead. I'll give you the money to get started, and maybe Derek will learn something useful." Jimmy grinned. "Deal." That night, after the kids were in bed, Beatrice and I lay talking. "You treat my brother just as well as you treat me," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm proud of Jimmy too," I replied. "He's a good man, always has been." Beatrice whispered, "I owe him for saving me and Luke back then. You're helping me repay that debt." "I love you," I said, holding her close. "No more than I love you," she whispered back. A week from Saturday, I'd be married again. I was more excited about this marriage than my last, knowing it would bring true happiness. Later, I asked Jimmy if he wanted to work Monday, but reminded him to take Beatrice for a ride in the evening when it was cool. Lila and Derek would get their turns on the bike too. Wednesday, Lila even asked Jimmy to take her to surprise her grandparents. Liz called that evening, furious about Lila riding a motorcycle. "Who is that biker?" she demanded. That's Jimmy Stein, my soon-to-be brother-in-law. I'm getting married this Saturday, I explained. Why wasn't I told about this? She snapped. It's none of your business, I said, trying to stay calm. Lila and Derek are in the wedding, and Beatrice is the bride. Liz continued with accusations, claiming Beatrice was after a sugar daddy. I shut her down, explaining I'd known Beatrice for 4 years, and we'd only been together after the divorce. She tried to dig into Jimmy's role, and I warned her to stay away from him. Liz shot back that I couldn't control her life, and I reminded her we were divorced. The conversation went nowhere, ending abruptly after I pointed out that even though the kids knew about her lifestyle, they still loved her, and I would make sure they continued to care for her. After the call, Beatrice said, "You were harsh on her, don't you think?" "Maybe," I admitted. "But I'm done letting her blame me for everything. The kids came through this okay, and I'm grateful to their grandparents for that." "You mean Iris and Walter?" "Yes, I had issues with Iris, but since I walked out on Liz, she's been more friendly." I concluded, "I have custody now, and if I mess up with the kids, it's on me." "You won't," Beatrice reassured me. "You love them, and they love you. I'll be here to help." Jimmy didn't come inside when he and Lila returned, but I needed to talk to her about her conversation with her mother. "Lila, your mom called earlier. She said you didn't answer some of her questions. You need to show more respect toward her. I think you were showing off because of the bike ride." "But, Dad," Lila protested, "she was trying to control me in front of Uncle Jimmy and Uncle Oscar. You have custody, so she had no right." "She's still your mother," I said. "Just because I have custody doesn't mean you can disrespect her. She loves you, and I won't let you forget that." "Should I call her?" Lila asked. "Do you think you should?" I responded. Lila nodded and went to make the call. When she returned, she said, "I apologized for showing off and told her how happy we are with Beatrice. She asked if we were happy living here, and I told her we are. I think she still loves you." "I know she does. Thanks for calling her, Lila." On Saturday, Jimmy asked, "Are you sure you want me at the wedding?" "Of course. You're family now. The kids already call you uncle, and we hope you'll stay with us for good." I noticed tears in his eyes when he turned away. Later that day, Mom, Dad, Iris, and Walter arrived early. Jimmy showed Dad and Walter the barn and how he planned to fix it up. Then we headed to the little church for the wedding. It took only 20 minutes for Beatrice and me to get married, and I couldn't help but smile at how quick it was. Afterward, I handed over the marriage license for the minister to sign. After lunch, Walter and Iris gifted us a one-night stay at a hotel, and we planned a longer honeymoon for August in the mountains, where we could rent ATVs and explore trails with the kids. Jimmy suggested we rent a couple of all-terrain vehicles, and soon, even I was considering getting riding gear, though I wasn't much of an outdoorsman. Jimmy spent most of his time fixing up the barn, and Derek enjoyed helping him. Jimmy explained everything to Derek as he worked, which I appreciated. Meanwhile, Derek also helped Beatrice with her import business, earning a little commission, while Lila spent more time with me, asking questions about my reporting work. When our vacation came, Lila and Derek were excited about the four-wheelers Jimmy had arranged. Since I wasn't comfortable riding one, Jimmy rented me a more stable Bobcat UDV to drive with Alex. We arrived at the cabin, and Jimmy quickly taught the kids how to ride safely. After giving them instructions, Derek asked, "How long before supper?" "About 45 minutes, I replied. "Take it easy until you get used to the ride." They sped off, and we soon heard the engines revving up. Beatrice smiled and said, "They'll be fine. They're good kids." That evening, we ended the day by roasting marshmallows around the fire. The next day, everyone did their own thing. Jimmy and the kids took the four-wheelers out again. Beatrice followed them with Alex and the Bobcat, and I went on a solo hike. When I returned around 1 o'clock, I saw a car parked in front of the cabin. Inside, Liz and my brother Oscar were there. Liz greeted me, surprised. "Mom said you were on vacation. I thought I'd come see the kids and meet your wife. Where are they?" "They're out on the four-wheelers," I replied, still standing at the door. Oscar, with a sarcastic tone, said, "Aren't you going to say hello? I'm your brother." "You're no brother of mine," I said coldly. "Liz, take him out of here. If you want to see the kids, come back alone." Oscar taunted, "Are you mad because I slept with your wife? I'm not leaving until I see your new one and my niece and nephew." My patience snapped. "You both need to leave now," I said. Oscar swung at me, and I blocked the second punch, landing a few of my own. Jimmy eventually pulled me off him. "Tommy, stop. You'll eliminate him." I turned to see Beatrice, the kids, and my parents, who had arrived and witnessed the fight. Liz helped Oscar up, and I told her, "Get him out of here, and don't bring him back." "Can I at least say goodbye to Lila and Derek?" Liz asked. "Make it quick," I replied, exhausted. Beatrice helped me inside, and I told her I needed a shower. Later, while soaking in the tub, my mom barged in. "I had to check on you. Oscar's in worse shape, but he'll be fine. You can't hurt a drunk." "Are they gone?" I asked. "Yes, Liz just left," she said before adding with a laugh, "I hope I see less of you at dinner than I did just now." A little later, Iris came in, apologizing for Liz bringing Oscar. "I wish they'd both just leave us all alone." "Iris, it's not your fault," I said. "They're adults, but they only think of themselves." She admitted, "I didn't like you much before, but I'm starting to change my mind." "Thanks, Iris," I said. "Now, can I finish my bath?" She laughed and left the room, and I thought about how much she'd softened. As I relaxed, I realized how much grandparents often make up for the mistakes of their children by doting on their grandchildren. At dinner, it was quiet. My mom seemed the most upset by Oscar's behavior, but I felt good about standing up to him for the first time. I hoped it was the end of the drama, but a month later, Oscar returned. When he knocked on the door, he said, "Tommy, I'm not looking for a fight. You beat me fair and square. I want to apologize and maybe be friends again." I cautiously let him in. "What do you want, Oscar?" he admitted. "I've messed up. You've got a good life, family, kids. I've got nothing. Dad won't speak to me and Mom cries every time she sees me." "You brought this on yourself," I said. "I know," he sighed. I offered him coffee, and as we sat down, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Oscar, you humiliated me. Why? How did this start?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It started years ago when you were away on assignment. I was home on leave, and I flirted with Liz. She didn't stop me. In fact, she encouraged it. I thought if you couldn't keep her satisfied, she was fair game." My fists clenched under the table, but I stayed quiet. Oscar continued. "Every time I was home, I slept with Liz. At first, I felt guilty, but that faded. I'm sorry, Tommy, truly. I'm also sorry for Mom. She won't let me stay at home anymore, and it hurts." "Are you going to marry Liz?" I asked, feeling a strange sense of relief. "God, no," he said quickly. "She's been cheating on me with a bunch of other men. Iris has barred me from her house, and Liz kicked me out before I could leave. Honestly, I don't miss her." "I know the feeling," I admitted, leaning back. "It's mostly relief." "Tommy, I don't want anything to do with you either, but I hope you can make it up to Mom someday." "I'm trying. I've got plans. You'll get your wish. I'm leaving soon." "Can I say goodbye to Lila and Derek tonight?" he asked. I thought about it and finally agreed. "You can come by. They used to look up to you when you were in the army." "I did too, but you've broken Mom's heart." Oscar nodded. "Thanks, Tommy. I'm trying to get my life together." "Find an unattached woman and make her happy. You might find happiness too," I said more gently. Later that evening, when Oscar came by, I let him see the kids. After spending a few minutes with them, he came back to the kitchen. "You've got great kids, Tommy. I envy you. I regret causing so much of the mess. I'm leaving tonight, and I don't know if I'll be back. Thanks for letting me apologize and see them." As he left, we shook hands. Despite everything, I knew I'd miss him and hoped he might return as a better man. Liz's life didn't improve. The store where she worked as a manager changed ownership after the owner's end of life, and she was fired by his daughter. She found work managing a 11, but lost that job too. Eventually, she moved back in with Iris and Walter. We didn't see her much, but I made sure the kids visited. Often, when they went to see her, she wasn't home, so they spent time with Iris and Walter instead. Liz never contributed financially, but that didn't matter. Beatrice and I were doing well. I was publishing 1 or 2 books a year, and Derek was earning his own money helping Beatrice. Lila graduated near the top of her class and went on to study journalism at the State University. Beatrice and I were proud of both kids. Alex was a joy, always making everyone laugh. The same year Lila left for university, Beatrice gave birth to twin girls, Bethany and Selena, who quickly became Beth and Sal. Jimmy also found happiness. He met a wonderful woman, and they had a son. He moved out of the barn and bought a cottage near his work, and we couldn't have been happier for him. Thanksgiving was at my house during Lila's 3rd year of university. Mom made an announcement. "I've been in touch with Oscar. It's been almost 5 years since we've seen him, and he wants to visit during Christmas. I already told him he's welcome." "Where has he been living?" I asked. "I'm not sure, but he said he's only 3 hours away. He offered to stay in a motel, but I told him that was silly. His old room is still available. It's strange he hasn't contacted us before now, I said. I told him I thought he might have died. He said no, but stayed away until he could come back in a way that would make us proud. He plans to ask Tommy for forgiveness. I recalled Oscar apologizing to me before he left town, but I remained skeptical about his return. That thought was interrupted on Saturday when Iris called. "Tommy, Liz is in the hospital. She'll recover, but she tried to take her life." "You're saying she attempted self-destruction?" I asked. "Yes, I found her unconscious after swallowing most of the pills in the medicine cabinet. They've got her in intensive care for now, but we'll move her to a regular room this afternoon. Can you bring the kids to see her?" "I'll make sure they visit. Lila heads back to school tomorrow, so it'll be mostly on Derek. I'll call you later." I broke the news to the kids. They weren't too surprised by her actions. Lila admitted, "It's depressing to visit her. She only complains about how life's treated her, but it's mostly her own doing." "You should both give her more attention," I advised. "It might make a difference." Derek agreed. "I'll visit more now that I'm out of high school." Later, Lila and Derek went to the hospital and returned after dark. Derek updated me. "Mom's severely depressed. They've put her on antidepressants, but she's being discharged tomorrow because she has no insurance. Graham and I said we'd cover the costs." "What's the plan?" I asked. She agreed to go to a mental institution for evaluation. Part of her problem is she's broke, and her unemployment benefits have run out. I offered to help find a facility, and Lila reassured me, "You're not responsible for her, Dad." "I know, but I can still help." The next day, Derek took Liz home while Lila went back to school. Derek called me later, saying, "Mom regrets what she did. The doctor said she needs to take her medicine regularly. Watch her closely, son. She's still unbalanced, and we need to get her properly evaluated. I'll work on it tomorrow." I found a state program offering treatment for people in Liz's situation, and luckily, they had a bed available. Derek and Iris took her to the facility the next day. At 42, Liz had no job, no home, and no income. This was a chance to get her the help she needed. 3 weeks later, Derek received Liz's evaluation report. It turned out her issues were medical and treatable. The doctor explained it was a hormonal imbalance, possibly dating back years, worsened by unemployment and early menopause. These factors had contributed to her depression and self-destruction attempt. Liz came home just before Christmas, with Lila and Derek picking her up. She returned to stay with Iris and Walter, trying to rebuild her life. I hadn't seen her in almost a year, and I didn't expect to over the holidays since our family had made it a habit to avoid each other after the incident with Oscar 5 years ago. One day, while Beatrice, Lila, Iris, and my mom were out shopping, Liz unexpectedly showed up. "Hello, may I come in?" she asked. I welcomed her inside, had Alex take her coat, and we went to the kitchen for coffee. Liz looked thinner and worn, but she seemed more composed. I brought out a coffee cake and asked her to cut it for the kids, introducing her as Lila and Derek's other mommy. After the kids ate, they returned to the TV, leaving us alone. "It's been a while, Liz. How are you?" I asked. "I'm better, but I feel foolish for how I behaved. There was a time I didn't want to live, but that's behind me now. I wanted to thank you for helping me get into that facility. Derek told me it was all because of you. You needed help, and Derek would have done it himself if he could. I just stepped in to support him." Liz sighed. "I've thought a lot about my life. I know I made mistakes, and I don't have any excuses. But I'm trying to move forward and find a job." "What kind of work are you looking for?" I asked. "Something in a store. I was a good manager for Calder, but I screwed up at that convenience store. The doctor said it might have happened anyway because of my condition." She paused before continuing. "I also want to apologize for how I treated you and everyone else over the years." "Apology accepted. No point dwelling on the past. Just follow the doctor's advice and move on." Liz smiled softly. "Thank you. Derek said something similar when he picked me up. It's good to hear it from both of you." As we talked, Derek returned to pick her up. Liz thanked me again for raising 2 wonderful kids. We shared coffee and cake. And as they were leaving, Alex commented, "Derek's mommy is a nice lady, isn't she, Daddy?" "Yes, she is," I replied quietly. 4 days before Christmas, the house was filled with excitement, especially from the younger kids. I wondered when Oscar would show up, and the next day, just before noon, he arrived with a woman, a young girl, and a baby. "Tommy, I have a family now. Am I welcome?" he asked. "Of course," I replied, surprised to see his new family. Oscar explained that he'd been working at a private school, teaching and mentoring kids. He had met his wife, Betty, a war widow there, and they had married 2 years ago. He wanted to come home because he thought our mom could finally be proud of him. That's exactly what I wanted for you, I told him. Oscar hesitated before asking, "Do you think I'll run into Liz? I'd like to apologize to her, but don't want to upset Betty." Liz was here yesterday. She's been dealing with some health issues, but is staying with Iris and Walter. If you do see her, I'd suggest not bringing up the past unless she does. Oscar agreed, and we joined everyone in the living room. Beatrice held their baby, and my girls were already sitting beside Betty. Oscar seemed at peace, and I could tell he had changed. Before leaving, Beatrice invited them to stay for lunch, and we all sat down together, preparing to share a meal as a newly extended family. The girl gave me a shy smile and followed us into the kitchen. I fried more French fries, and Oscar called Mom to let her know he'd be there after lunch. "I guess I'm Mom's Christmas present this year," Oscar said. "It's about time, right?" "Yeah, she'll be even happier when she finds out you have a family," I replied. Oscar looked sad for a moment. It's tough knowing it took 50 years to make her happy. I'll do my best to keep it that way from now on. As Oscar and his family were getting ready to leave, Lila walked in with Liz, making things a little awkward, but Beatrice handled it smoothly. "Lila, you remember your Uncle Oscar, and of course, Liz, you do too. Oscar's here with his family. This is his wife, Betty, and their daughter, Ginger, along with their baby, Josh," Beatrice said, introducing everyone. Betty approached Liz. "I've seen pictures of you with Lila and Derek. Oscar always said Lila would be as beautiful as you, and he was right. I hope we'll see you tomorrow at his parents' house." Liz hesitated. "I'm not sure. I've been sick, but if I feel up to it, I'll come." Betty smiled. "I hope so. Oscar says he's starting his second life at 40, thanks to Tommy nudging him in the right direction." After they left, I reflected on how I had told Oscar years ago not to come back until he made our mom proud. Maybe that was the nudge he needed after all. Beatrice laughed. "I think he got the message after you knock him up." Liz chimed in. "Yeah, I had to listen to him complain about how mean you were." I decided to give Mom a call. Oscar was here, and Liz showed up too. "I think it'd be good if you invited Iris, Walter, and Liz for Christmas. Oscar won't cause any trouble." Mom was hesitant. "Why all the extra people? Liz might stir up drama." "She won't. I'll make sure of it. This could be the best Christmas ever." "Are you going soft on Liz?" "Maybe. She's been sick, and now that she's getting help, she could use a little kindness." Mom agreed to call Lila and invite Liz. Later, Lila told me, "Grammy invited Mom for Christmas. I think it'll be nice." Christmas was wonderful, with no drama, just happiness. Liz, a bit out of place, sat next to me, quietly observing. She turned to me and said, "This could have been my family if I hadn't been so selfish. You're the one holding everyone together." "No, it's Lila and Derek who hold us together. They love you just as much as they love me. Derek will help you find something to feel good about again." "I hope so. I've made a mess of my life, but I'll do whatever work I can find." "Don't worry. Derek will help you find something meaningful." Liz smiled and admitted she was grateful that Iris hadn't shut her out despite everything. A month later, Derek came to me concerned about Liz's future. "Dad, Mom still hasn't found work. I need to help her before she falls back into depression." "Do you have money to invest?" I asked. "Yeah, I've saved nearly $75,000 for my business." "Why?" "Buy a store and let her manage it like she did with Calder's." Derek thought it was a great idea. He found a convenience store that had been on the market for a while. After some research and appraisals, Derek was ready to make an offer, knowing this was the right move to help his mother rebuild her life. Derek got the appraisals and we worked out a fair offer. He'd take over the mortgage, pay for the inventory at wholesale minus 10%, and ask the owner to hold half of the remaining balance, paid monthly at a lower interest rate than the mortgage. This left $117,000 for Derek to finance. "I'll cover that," I said, "but you have to agree to take evening classes in marketing at community college. Get an associate's degree in case you want to pursue something else later." "How will I pay you back? I won't be able to work full-time after a year," I asked. "Sell your mother a share of the store or pay me back after the mortgage is done," my father replied. "I don't need the money now. It's a gentleman's agreement. No paperwork." "So Mom doesn't need to know?" I asked, seeking reassurance. "Exactly," he confirmed. "And Beatrice will be fine with it. Just tell your mom you have an investor. Get her excited about the store." "I think she'll love it," I said, feeling more at ease. A few years later, Lila, now almost 30 and working for a major publisher, called me. "Dad, I have 2 weeks off in July. Can you get the whole family together? I might have an announcement," she said. "Getting married?" I asked, curious. "Engaged. You'll love him. He's a lot like you. Let's all stay in the bunkhouse together," she suggested. "I'm not a kid, Lila," I said, chuckling. "Just for one night, Dad, everyone talks about how much they love you. You're the most important person in the family," she insisted warmly. Touched by her words, I agreed to organize the gathering. First, I called Derek, who now ran Franklin's Grocery after deciding against college. "Dad, this is great. I'll announce my engagement too. It's a secret for now. Can you invite Mom? It would mean a lot to her," he said. I called Liz and invited her. She asked, "Can I bring a special friend?" "Of course," I replied. "Bring him and his kids. They'll fit right in." Her voice caught with emotion. "Thank you, Tommy. I'm so happy." I made more calls, inviting Oscar and his family, my parents, and Liz's parents. Everyone was excited and I felt content. Reflecting on my life, I realized how far I'd come from those early years of dissatisfaction. Now, everything felt right.